Moon Gang.
Hello, and I hope you are having a good Friday morning, afternoon, evening, night, whatever time it is for you. I hope you are having a very, very good one. This will be day 2 of the coverage of the calamity, the insanity, the crazy shit that is going down in Ukraine, Russia right now. A lot of stuff has been continuing to develop, so we're going to be covering that. We're going to be like bouncing around through many different news sources. We'll kind of give an update of what happened in the overnight session, at least for the past 4 or 5 hours, and then we're going to be getting into the markets when that opens in about an hour, at least in the US. But right now there's actually a decent amount of green on one of the most recent updates coming in live, that Putin has agreed to meet with like the leaders in Kiev, Kiev, I should say. So looking for some positivity there. But overall, before we get into all this, particularly the aspects of the market, just remember a little bit of I suppose, a sobering reminder that once again, if your biggest concern of the day is your P&L green, is your P&L red, what are you doing tonight? What are you doing this weekend? Issues with your partner, significant other, manager, something like that, you're doing pretty good. I understand. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be like, oh man, like it could be worse, so I should be absolutely jolly right now. That's not my point at all. I'm just really kind of, I've been thinking about this a lot lately of sometimes it's good to have that sobering reminder, especially is your trade a good trade, a bad trade? There are people right now in real time scared for their life, and they would most likely trade anything to be in your position of, hey, all my big problem is on my up or down money. So please kind of like keep that with you throughout the day, especially as we get into talking about trades, because really the important stuff is what in the world is going on with Putin. The guy seems to be completely off his rocker, and he's just causing mass hysteria and devastation throughout the world as he's, I guess, redrawing his line of the Iron Curtain. But yes, as long as there's news, as long as there's volatility, as long as there's something that is clear that a lot of people are interested in terms of like, hang on, like what's going on, because it obviously is a tense situation, I will be here. I'm more than prepared once again to be here a full day, but in a certain sense, I actually hope that it's not necessary, because if it's not necessary, that means that things have calmed down. So fingers crossed that I actually don't have to be here covering what's going on, but time will obviously tell. So with it, it's obviously a very fluid situation. So we're going to be hopping into some of the news. I just wanted to give you a quick, like little, I guess, snapshot right now. The S&P, the Qs, and the Russell are actually all looking pretty good. And I'll know a little bit more at 8:30, 9 and 9:30, 9 and 9:30, to kind of give you a better idea of like the internals of the market. But it does obviously look like some buyers are finally stepping in, and I might be waiting for opening for a little confirmation. But if we get some positivity of the meetings with like Putin and Zelensky from Ukraine, I honestly think the markets could go higher and higher on that news. And also, in a completely unrelated note, it was announced that we're expected to hear the Supreme Court pick from Biden today. Once again, unrelated news, but I just wanted to share that with all of you. All right, so here we are, and let's just run through some of, like, I guess the updates. I guess before I get into that, there's been clearly a massive push, I would assume, from like quote unquote propaganda, Russian propaganda, which it just seems so weird to say given, like, I guess the tone of that over like the past 2 like political cycles. But understand, and this comes back to my like first point of, hey, if you are getting to watch this stream today and you're like, what's a good trade, what's a bad trade, your life could be so much worse off right now. Definitely, whatever it is, if you believe in karma, a greater being, your lucky stars, or if you just want to take a little bit of a sobering fact, life is very tough for people actively on this world right now. Some very sobering pictures. This is posted by NPR. So also, I'm seeing some more of that propaganda of like, oh, it's not that bad. Like, hang on. I mean, they're literally invoking most likely like conscription. I was reading a little bit of that last night. It's a very scary time. A little bit more in the markets. Hang on, this is now breaking news. What's this talking about? Fed's favorite inflation gauge up 5.2%, biggest annual gain since 1983. Once again, don't forget we are at that 4-decade high level of inflation. But right now, across the markets, we're seeing quite a bit of green. The Dow, the S&P 500, and the Nasdaq 100, green, 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 green. And actually, as you saw from that quick snapshot, we're actually pushing more green as we are talking about all of this right now. And I think it's actually on the commentary that, let me show you some of the most recent tweets. We're seeing some positivity. Where did I just read this within the past couple minutes? Shoot, where is it? Hang on, let me just go to one of these profiles. We have right here. No. Kremlin says it agrees to talks with Kiev. This is being reported by the Wall Street Journal. So obviously that's a bit of positivity, more of hopefully, I can't really say that this was completely a diplomatic solution, but it might be getting to the point where we might be getting to a solution. So I obviously very much want that to play out. And this whole debacle in terms of markets, it really is complicating what the Fed is doing. So right now we have the unknown risk of Putin, and now we have the unknown risk of how is the Fed through monetary policy going to battle the inflation that we are obviously staring in the face. Let's get a little bit more into the specifics of yesterday, what happened overnight, and then hopefully we could get a better prep for what may or may not play out for the day. Unprecedented sanctions are cold comfort for Ukrainians. So yesterday we watched Boris Johnson talk, we watched Justin Trudeau talk, and then we watched Joe Biden also speak. In my humble opinion, I thought Joe Biden's was like kind of the weakest reassurance for Ukrainians. Obviously, that's not everyone's going to hold that opinion. Once again, it's an opinion, not a fact. But there was an increase in sanctions that are all determined to kind of hit Russia from an economic standpoint. It really does seem like the goal here is to cut them off from the world economy. So that's the best way I could sum it up. But yesterday there were additional banks that were sanctioned. Right now there's calls for personal sanctions on Putin. And then from there, there's all these little finer details. They're trying to hit some of these Russian elites, and the list does go on and on and on. The sanctions against Russia today by President Biden are unprecedented. The move to cut off Russia's largest banks from the Western financial systems, in particular, will inflict severe economic pain on Russia, possibly pushing it into a recession, experts tell Axios. I was part of the team that designed the sanctions in 2014, and this is far beyond what we contemplated. The Russian financial sector is by and large isolated now from the global financial system. So once again, isolation, and it's looking to undermine it. Some of the rhetoric from Biden's speech yesterday was more of, okay, that was the whole thing of in a month, tell me what's going on, because I guess obviously it's going to take some time to feel the pain from economic sanctions from the entire world. It's not just from the US, but it's Canada, it's UK, it's many, many global powers. A lot of people are standing up, a lot of global powers, a lot of countries, a lot of other people that we've just been seeing all these different speeches from have been choosing to really do what they can, the tools at their disposal to hit Russia economically. And this, if you want to tie it to NATO, Article 4, Article 5 of NATO, we're not seeing those same powers get involved in really let's say a true physical contact, or really just because Ukraine is not part of NATO. And right now, it would get invoked if one NATO soldier ended up dying, or if they ended up invading another country, like if they attempted to get into Poland or something like that. That would be a completely different story. But right now, it is isolated to Ukraine, at least as we're speaking about this in real time. If you want to get a little bit more of the details of this, feel free to check out this article on Axios. I thought it was actually a pretty good one. So over the past, 5 hours, I was tracking this till about midnight, 1 a.m, something like that. I just want to go over what's been happening potentially while you were asleep. Russia has failed to secure its main objectives. UK defense minister, maybe referring to Kiev. There's a little bit of back and forth on did they or did they not take Chernobyl, but most people are reporting that they took Chernobyl. This is President Zelensky, definitely a worthwhile follow on Twitter. Obviously, you want to see what's going on. You got to follow the president of the country that is being invaded. Held talks with Prime Minister Boris Johnson, reported on the course of Ukraine's defense and insidious attacks on Kiev by the aggressor today. Ukraine needs to support of partners more than ever. We demand effective counteraction to the Russian Federation, sanctions must be further strengthened. So one difference, Boris Johnson was all about taking Russia off the SWIFT system, which is the Society of Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications. Basically, it's how on an international scale, it's our financial messaging. It allows for like money transfers and all that. There's over 11,000 institutions, over 200 countries. The U.S. did not really bring that up, and it said that our sanctions are actually already worse than that. But then Boris Johnson was saying, like, his whole list of sanctions, including let's take them off of SWIFT. This is one of those things that's not going to be decided by a singular country. It's going to be decided by I guess. It is right now, it's kind of presided over by the Bank of Belgium, like the National Bank of Belgium. That's like the one who looks over SWIFT, but there's many international partners, 11,000 institutions, 200 countries. So it's going to take some sort of, I would assume, vote process to actually get Russia off of it. But for right now, Russia is still able to use SWIFT. And why that would be such a big hit to them is if they're doing any international trade, i.e. with oil or natural gas, there's no way they could like capture any profits or sell, because SWIFT, like if they're not on SWIFT, no one's going to be sending them money. In a speech late on Thursday, Ukrainian President Zelensky said preliminary data showed 137 Ukrainians had died in the first day of Russia's invasion. A further 316 people were injured. According to our information, the enemy has listed me as target number 1 and my family as target number 2. They want to destroy the country politically, terminating the head of state. So whatever you are or aren't seeing, this unfortunately has led to bloodshed. This is not a, I suppose, a victimless incident or invasion. Yes, people are losing their lives. This is a very, very real thing. 137 Ukrainians died on the first day. Let's fingers crossed, prayers up to the sky that it just can stop at the lowest number possible. U.S. says China's trade with Russia won't be enough to offset sanctions. China said it would maintain normal trade relations with Russia, while the U.S., UK, and European Union announced new sanctions following Russia's invasion of Ukraine on Thursday. The White House subsequently said that Chinese and Russian economies account for a far smaller portion of the world economy than Group of 7 nations, which means Beijing's actions cannot cover the impact of sanctions. China is the largest trade partner for both Russia and Ukraine. However, it's still too early to tell the extent of China's economic role in these tensions. Obviously, that's going to be furthering its own types of tensions of why is China not like really supporting everything else on the global scale. And that's probably a multi-hour, multi-day discussion to get into their current decision. Here's a little bit, a picture, a little bit of a saddening picture. You can see this bridge was blown up. Destroyed bridges were not sent to journalists by Anton, an advisor to the Ukrainian Interior Ministry. So you could see these Ukrainian forces blow up bridge to prevent Russian advance to Kiev. And then what do we have right here? Champions League soccer final moved out of Russia, obviously. On top of that, you're actually seeing over the past half day, there are many, many sports. Like name a professional sport that has been televised lately, soccer, basketball. You're seeing a lot of athletes somehow showing their I guess, stance against, I keep saying Russia, but I really mean Putin. There are so many people in Russia right now, and talk about being brave. The amount of people who have been arrested in Russia who were protesting what's going on kind of on the side of the world, it truly is brave. It truly is, it deserves applause, because these people, who knows what's going to happen with them, but yet, decent amount of people still protesting, speaking out against Putin and military leadership. This is very much a Putin thing and his cronies. It's not a Russian thing. If you look at what's going on, there's some like live cam footage. A lot of people in Russia do not want what's happening to be happening. Kiev officials asked residents to make petrol bombs as Russians closed in on capital. It was being televised on national TV in Ukraine of how to make a Molotov cocktail. That was a crazy development overnight. Be vigilant and stay indoors, at home or in shelters. Going outside is very dangerous now due to the approach of the enemy. The only exception may be the need to move to shelter or if the air alarm signal is activated. But yeah, they were teaching people on TV how to make a Molotov cocktail. Kremlin says it will pose retaliatory sanctions on the West. This is all in response to the financial sanctions from many, many people. Russia's Lavrov says Moscow open to talks with Kiev. only once Ukraine surrenders. So we are kind of waiting for that. They will look at the surrender as like kind of like a neutrality movement. UN says Russia has arrested more than 1,800 anti-war protesters, and the number is growing. As you can see, people within Russia, and not only just the citizens, but you're seeing actually well-known people from Russian celebrities denounce the military operation. The list is growing and growing. Many people within Russia speaking out about it. Okay. UN recorded 127 civilian casualties in Ukraine yesterday. That is once again according to the UN. EU set to freeze Putin and Lavrov's European assets. And that was the most recent update 31 minutes ago, at least according to CNBC. One quick thing I did want to touch on before we really get rolling. Ukrainian central bank suspends electronic cash transfers, bolstering the use case for crypto. Right here, when you have governments involved with money and obviously heightened tension environments like this, it actually really does give a little bit more credence to the concept of having some form of asset, as in crypto, that can't really be messed with by a government. So especially when you have things such as bank runs, or if you're looking at inflation, stagflation, hyperinflation, all these Asians at the end, or like all like government, national craziness, tensions, it is giving a little bit more credence of having some sort of asset class that is finite and a government is not having their grubby little fingers in. So I just wanted to quickly bring that up, but we could talk about that a little bit more on the crypto channel. I've been looking at this BBC News, Ukraine maps tracking Russia's invasion. So this is from BBC. I do find it to be, I guess, trustworthy here, but what we're talking about today, it really does seem to be particularly focused on Kiev, and you could track this and we'll be paying attention to it throughout the day. Right now, Ukraine's capital Kiev braces for attack as Russian troops near. So that's I can't say the most recent updates. I've been finding that some of these live reports, I mean, oh, wait, Zelensky is talking. Okay, no, that was a little bit old, but we have pretty much every news source up here. We're going to be bouncing between all of them to see what to make an idea of what is or isn't going on. We're seeing the market still looking pretty green into open. Before we hop into the I guess specifics here of what's happening on some of these news stations, I do want to give you a quick run through some of the most recent updates, at least on Twitter, from some of the sources that I trust. This came out 2 minutes ago. AP source: Biden to nominate federal judge Kajani Brown Jackson, Ms. Jackson, to be the first Black woman on the Supreme Court. Putin and Xi said use of sanctions to achieve selfish goals of individual countries was unacceptable. So we're seeing this weird alliance between Russia and China right now. China's Xi told Putin he respects Russia's actions, affirmed readiness for close coordination and mutual support at United Nations. Very, very obviously opportunistic. And then we got some of the Fed numbers coming in that relate, I shouldn't say inflation numbers that will relate to the Fed. Kremlin says it agrees to talks with Kiev. Wall Street Journal: OPEC likely to stick existing oil output policy at March 2nd meeting despite price surges after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That's from OPEC sources. All right, what else? So oil could still continue to go higher and higher. Ukrainian military vehicles are entering Kiev to defend its capital. All right, so those are some of the most recent ones. Where is Zero Hedge? Let's check this out. Putin and Xi said use of sanctions to achieve selfish goals of, man, that's going to probably lead to some other crazy things. Biden, Ms. Jackson to the Supreme Court. So we're going to see how that goes today, but that was kind of a predicted announcement breaking a little bit earlier. All right, so that's it for now. Let's switch over to some of the news sources, and then we could get a little bit more prep for the day. What is Euro News? Let's see what NBC is up to.
Country yesterday in a major show of solidarity. NBC News correspondent Jesse Kirsch joins us from Chicago, one of the places that saw demonstrations. Hi, Jesse. Good morning.
Good morning, Savannah. There were hundreds of people gathered here. We are in a neighborhood called the Ukrainian Village. This city, like communities all over the country, have substantial Ukrainian populations. In fact, there are about 1 million people living in the United States with ties to that embattled nation. Like the rest of the world, they are watching.
Switch over to this one, actually, just for this. It sounds like they're giving us some new updates.
We want to hit the Russian economy. We have decided yesterday massive and efficient sanctions against the Russian economy. And this will be the Russian economy that will pay the price for the decision of Vladimir Putin. This is the Russian people that will pay the price for the decisions of Vladimir Putin. This is the Russian oligarchs that will pay for the foolish decisions of Vladimir Putin. Do not make any mistake about that. They will suffer from the decisions that has been taken by Vladimir Putin. Not the European economy, not the world economy, but the Russian one.
But in seeming contrast to Le Maire, the European Commission Vice President said the sanctions would come with an economic cost for Europe.
If we are applying massive sanctions package against Russia, as it is going to have also certain consequences on the EU economy. Already we see some jitteries in the financial markets, but in this situation, as a European Union, as a Western democratic world, we have to respond, and yes, it will come with certain economic cost.
Significantly, European leaders have not yet agreed to cut Russia off from the SWIFT global interbank payment system.
Coming by road and rail, some of the first refugees from Ukraine arrived in Poland. These are some of the few hundred passengers from Kharkiv in eastern Ukraine that arrived in the Polish border town on Thursday.
We've actually been very lucky to get out of Ukraine with the second to last train that was coming here. We've spent last 16 hours using all of our luck coming here. Many people, many of our friends will get refugee status, but we are fortunate enough to have our accommodation planned. And we are very happy that we have our friends in Poland that are ready to help our people.
Poland has already set up at least 8 centers to greet the people streaming over the border, many of whom are from eastern Ukraine and are leaving the region because they fear for their safety. The centers that will greet them are already set up with places to rest, medical care, and food.
You can stay up to date with our top story on this live blog on our website, Euronews.com. Do check it out. We'll be back in a moment.
See if I can find some other stuff for all of you right now.
Coming up on Euronews.
The ocean faces many problems for which we as a society are responsible, whether we realize it or not. European enthusiasts are finding new ways to bolster public awareness, as we'll see on ocean, coming up on Euronews.
Oh, we don't need that. This is what Kiev right now, view from Kiev as Russian forces press closer. So pretty calm right now. Some people walking around, very few cars. What do we have? This is ABC. Let's see what ABC is up to.
But we have now learned that this will go to Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. That is the president's pick. Of course, a bit of a blow to Jim Clyburn, but he will forever have his mark on this process as the congressman who pushed the president to announce that he will pick a black woman for the court.
That's Supreme Court. Let's see what CNBC
saw that
is
he
up to.
was going to invade Ukraine. I've been arguing this since the beginning of January because it was so clear that sanctions wouldn't deter him. The only thing that would have deterred Putin, remember, is a significant improvement in Ukraine's defense capability that would have inflicted serious damage on a Russian invading force. But we decided not to do that. In fact, we dialed back our arming of the Ukrainians last year, which I think was a very bad mistake by the Biden administration. And we also temporarily, of course, lifted the sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which has, of course, now been cancelled. So all of these things are happening too late, and they won't stop the outcome, which I think Jim Cramer rightly said a minute ago, is going to be the decapitation of Ukraine, the installation of a puppet government, and the rest of us are going to, I'm afraid, just look away.
Neil, we've got some breaking news that's crossing. I want to thank you for your perspective on this. Just want to bring you this news. NBC News now reporting that President Biden will nominate a federal appellate judge. Ketanji Brown Jackson as its first black woman to the U.S. Supreme Court.
We already know that.
That news just crossing right now, and we wanted to bring you that before the end of the broadcast. Joe and Becky?
Yeah, we could tell you a little bit about that. Ketanji Brown Jackson is someone who's
CNBC
been on the federal
little bit
appeals
slow
court
on this particular
for about a
report.
decade.
Front runner for this, yeah.
She's a former public defender, too. I should point that out, too. Oops, sorry, I think we're out of time.
Yep.
A little slow there.
I think we are. We'll have a lot more at the top of the hour. Make
Actually,
sure you
all
join us next
mainstream
week. Have a great
media was
weekend,
slow
everybody.
on this one.
Thanks.
All right. Well, I guess we're done with them. Euro News. What else do we have going on? Everyone, the stream has concluded. I guess we're not getting NBC anymore. They're done. I guess that leaves me to give you guys the news. All right. Let's hop into some of the recent updates we have here. Unusual Wales. Let's see what Unusual Wales has been up to. Ukrainian President Zelensky says Russian advance has been stopped in most directions. Good. Giant Japanese e-commerce launches NFT marketplace. That's kind of a big news. 5,000 American troops have arrived in Poland. That's at least 7,000 plus slated. Chinese ambassador to U.S. Taiwan independent forces are biggest obstacle to China's reunification. Czech Republic stops issuing residence permits to Russian citizens. That's the Czech Republic. Vladimir Putin is prepared to send a delegation to Minsk for negotiations on Ukraine's neutrality as Russia's continues its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The Kremlin said on Friday Russia's conditions, however, effectively amount to Ukraine's surrender. 18,000 rifles have been delivered to volunteering street fighters in Kiev. Morgan Stanley has disclosed the U.S. securities regulator has been examining the bank's block trading business since 2019, and the Department of Justice recently joined with its own investigation. Remember, that's a separate investigation than the short-selling probe. Ukraine Defense Minister, upward of 1,000 Russian soldiers killed. Oh, wow. So on Russia's side, apparently 1,000 killed. Breaking, EU is planning to freeze Putin's assets. The enemy wants to put the capital on its knees to destroy us. What else do we have? All right, so we have that. Some other sources. Let's see what Thomas is up to. "15 minutes ago, this Syrian rebel has probably destroyed more armored vehicles than any other man in modern history. How can I go to Ukraine and fight alongside the Ukrainian army? Is there a way? Is there a way? I'm ready." Wow. Latest video from Chechnya as the rally appears to have been today. The Kremlin is sensitive about Russian casualties in Ukraine, but won't give a damn about Chechens dying in their thousands to seize the country. No sound on that one. I'd like to point out that Turkey has told Ukraine it won't stop Russian naval from passing through the Bosphorus Strait. But yes, the only one, all right. The difference between people like President Zelensky and Petro on one hand and former Afghan president. Apparently even the Taliban reached out to like Russia and Ukraine and they had their own opinion on it. Molotov cocktails prepared for battle for Kiev. Thousands of Chechen paramilitary, known as some word I can't say, preparing as they leave for Ukraine to join Russia invasion. So Chechens are joining Russians. It's so wild. All right, that's not playing. So wild. I agree with this. Russia wants a war with Ukraine. Putin does. Remember that. This isn't Russians. This is Putin. Putin. Everyone made fun of how I said it.
Блядь, смотрите, что происходит на Оболоне, блядь, ебать, вся Оболонь, блядь, все мужчины, блядь, собираются, блядь, посмотрите, как все будет. Приходите, приходите, мы вас будем всех встречать. Даже без...
Wild. All right, there were some the Kiev Independent. What do we have? Ukraine reports over 1,000 Russian soldiers killed on invasion's second day. Ukraine's armed forces allege that this is the largest number of casualties in conflict ever sustained by Russia in one day. Russia is ready to send a delegation to Minsk for negotiations with Ukraine. Vladimir Putin's Peskov, as quoted in UNIAN agency. Air raid alert in Kiev. Most people going to the closest shelter. That was an hour ago. So as of this morning, in the past couple hours, like, I mean, we're getting some of these like air raid, but also they're simultaneously saying, hang on, like, we're willing to talk now. I want to deliver a message to the Russian president. Fights are ongoing all over the country. Let's begin negotiations to stop people from dying. That's from Zelensky. Now I want to say to our troops, hold your ground. You are all we have. In all countries, in all cities, take the streets and demand peace for Europe, peace for Ukraine. Repeated his demand in Russian. If you are in Europe, have military training, and don't want to look on the indecisiveness of your politicians, you can move to our country and together with us defend Europe where it is much needed. That is an incredibly powerful statement. Europe has enough strength to stop the aggression, visa cancellations for Russians, cutting them from SWIFT, a total isolation of Russia, recalling ambassadors, embargo on petroleum, imposing a no-fly zone. This must be in the table. 2 days straight, our cities are witnessing shelling. Tank columns and air assaults are similar to what Europe already witnessed during World War II. Europe said never again, but here we are. I know you can see this, all of you, but we don't know what we are going to do with it. How are you going to defend yourself if you're so slow in supporting us in Ukraine? Air raid alerts in Kiev and the Rivne. Russian forces have entered the Obolon district in Kiev. Just for a quick map right here, there's Obolon in like kind of the north side, right on the west of the river. Remember, Kiev is in kind of the center north side of Ukraine, and this is Belarus on the top, and Russia's over here. But Belarus has kind of been giving passage to Russian soldiers. At least those were the reports from yesterday to now. Belarus just letting them kind of use their land and come in from the north. They've been tracking down on the river, and they're obviously trying to take over the capital. But Obolon is on the north side of the capital, but northwest, west of the river, the Dnieper River. All right, let me go back to this. Ukrainian government is seeking hackers to counter cyber warfare. The country is looking to recruits from its hacker underground to protect key digital infrastructure and conduct cyber spying on Russia. The U.S. also saying willing to kind of engage in some cyber warfare. Once again, this is the Kiev Independent. Definitely a worthwhile follow on Twitter. Live on Reuters.
State of the Union. You got to show them I'm vaccinated. I took a test.
No. Is this it? NATO Leader Summit. Okay. Sorry, that was Marco Rubio. All right, we're waiting for this to get going. Stoltenberg speaks at virtual NATO Leader Summit. Yes, there's a NATO meeting today. I guess we were waiting for that to get rocking. Let's take a quick peek. So the market's looking good. In the past couple minutes, it's been going down a little bit. If this holds, maybe I'll finally go back long on the market, bullish on the market. But I don't know. Something about yesterday's move, I still thought, I don't know. Kiev. Oh, am I pronouncing it wrong? It's Kiev. Kiev is how you say it. K-E-E-V. Kiev. All right. What's going on with Reuters here? Waiting on this. Waiting. Ghost. Matt, if you roll down the call and then the Iron Condor. I could talk about that in a bit. Iron Condor stuff. All right. We getting rocking with this? Who else is talking? All right. They're talking about the new Supreme Court nomination. Judge Ms. Jackson Brown. Judge Brown. Kiev under siege. Kiev. So that's the live look at it. We have a Euro news correspondent. Okay, waiting. New Supreme Court. That's some hot news, I suppose. Inflation up. We could save that for later. We don't need that now, but yes, inflation is still sky high. As we are waiting for the talk at NATO to get rocking, let's just go over this. According to CNBC, 5 things to know. Futures erase losses as fighting Ukraine is assessed. If you think that's wild, it is wild. But it's also one of these things that sometimes the market isn't logical, and maybe it was pricing in a more severe, like, global fallout. And then all of a sudden, especially in day 2, if we're going to get it quote unquote resolved, yeah, that could be met by some bullishness. But don't forget, this also additionally complicates the situation with the Fed and monetary policy. Key inflation gauges favored by the Fed out before the bell. And right here, rising 5.1% year over year. The core personal consumption expenditures price index, yes, it's still high. The fastest gain since September 1983. So another one of the gauges clocking in very, very hot. Ukraine's capital under threat as Russia presses invasion. CDC to significantly ease COVID mask guidelines Friday. There's been a huge plummet in new cases, which is great news. Biden has made decision on Supreme Court nominee, and we know that is Judge Brown. All right, we are still waiting on that, so we don't need this anymore. As we are waiting for this to play out, I do have some other stuff we can go over that I want to just share with you. We are right here. Hang on one second. Russia ramped up its all-out assault on Ukraine that began yesterday morning, leading to dozens of casualties, harsher sanctions from the West, and more turmoil around the world. Here are the latest updates in the largest ground war in Europe since World War II. The Russians are closing in on Kiev. Despite meeting fiercer than expected Ukrainian resistance, Russian forces advanced to the outskirts in the capital and hit Kiev with a series of airstrikes Friday. This is basically where people in the U.S. were asleep, kind of during our night, forcing residents to hide out in subway stations, some of which were built by the Soviets deep underground to double as bomb shelters. Addressing the nation, President Zelensky said Russians are coming after him. Specifically, the enemy has marked me as enemy number 1. And we also know that he's continued to say his family was marked as enemy number 2. The West hit Russia with more sanctions. The U.S. unleashed a barrage of new economic penalties on Russia. Once again, economic penalties, which included cutting off Russia's largest bank from the U.S. financial system, export controls on high-tech parks, and sanctions on more Russian elites. Other Western powers such as the EU, Australia, and Canada joined the U.S. in its sanctions jamboree. The scope of these sanctions is unprecedented. Edward Fisherman was saying, and he was the one who helped with Obama when they were doing the whole Crimea thing, and he was saying that these are actually more extreme than we even imagined, and that was back in 2014. The Russian financial sector is by and large isolated from the global financial system. However, Western leaders have thus far decided not to block Russia from SWIFT global payment system, which has outraged the Ukrainian government. People around the world are protesting, including in Russia. It seems like most people besides Putin and his cronies do not want what's happening to be happening. And now we're seeing a lot of athletes, celebrities getting involved. They're even moving the European football, the governing body, the UEFA. They moved their championship game out of Russia. Looking ahead, more than 100,000 people have fled the country already, but Ukrainian men aged 18 to 60 are required to stay as part of the martial law that has been imposed. 18 to 60, if you are a man in Ukraine, you are not allowed to leave because of martial law, basically conscription. Many are preparing to take up arms, including the mayor of Kiev, former heavyweight boxing champion Klitschko. I don't have another choice. I have to do that. I would fight, he said. 10 sources. All right, we have this. Russia and Ukraine combined account for 1/3 of global wheat exports, 1/5 of corn trade, and nearly 80% of sunflower oil production. Per the USDA, the war has caused prices to skyrocket, raising concerns about food security in the Middle East and North Africa, which largely depend on Ukraine for their wheat. Lebanon, for instance, imports 50% of its wheat consumption from Ukraine, so wheat prices probably going sky high. We have some Russian rappers announcing that they are postponing all their gigs in Russia. All right. Those are some of the recent updates. I guess this is just taking forever for him to start talking. Let me know if he starts talking. We could come back to this. UFA. So their soccer game's not happening. Do we have any new reports? Oh, what is this one?
Afraid of engaging in talks with Russia. We are not afraid of discussing anything such as security guarantees for our state. We are not afraid of talking about neutral status. Fighting is ongoing over Ukraine, he went on to say.
Anonymous hackers have taken down the Russian Ministry of Defense website. Ukraine, I hope you stay with us all day, Matt. Yeah, I'm going to be here.
Vladimir Putin is
in times like this.
To negotiate. So
I'm definitely going to be with you folks.
All of these developments to our desk here at Live Now from Fox. We will report it to you raw and unfiltered. That is what we are all about here. I do want to switch gears momentarily and bring you all a bit of news that we are seeing from home, from Washington, D.C. to be exact. We've been waiting for this announcement for some time now, and we are officially getting reports that President Biden's pick for the
High Court we've been over this.
Is in, according to
definitely a step in the direction of progression. I believe this is the first African American woman nominated to be a Supreme Court
this is
Judge
actually according
Jackson.
To a person very familiar with the matter, making her actually the first black woman selected to serve on a court that
Is this a typo? I thought her name was Jackson Brown, not Brown Jackson.
So definitely a historic
They're very
move there from President Joe Biden. Now Jackson Biden delivers on a campaign promise to make the historic appointment and to further diversify a court that was made up entirely of white men for almost.
All right, so we've been over that. Let's see what
Border,
this is.
then had to walk because there was so much traffic. A 17-hour wait. It's backed up for 10 miles. She walked for about 6 miles and then arrived here with her baby and another son and a bag. People are exhausted, but they're being fed here by the Polish military. You can see
Crypto
donuts.
bouncing.
There's a soup station behind, and people are getting what they need. Also something, it's busy. Cell phones. They're trying to ensure that they can connect with their families back home by getting the SIM cards they need here. In all, the UNHCR says there are about 100,000 people who've been displaced in Ukraine because of the violence, many thousands of them.
Russian Foreign Ministry says we regret that Kiev has cut ties with Moscow. German Foreign Minister Baerbock says we need to pave the way for targeted sanctions and not just sanctions that sound big.
NATO allies to discuss Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This after he imposed new sanctions on Russia that he says will inflict a lot of economic pain. Senior White House correspondent Mary Bruce has the latest on that. Good morning, Mary.
This morning, protests against Russia's invasion of Ukraine from Poland to Germany, London, and New York.
Stand with Ukraine!
As the U.S. and key allies strike back with severe sanctions, President Biden promising Vladimir Putin will pay a price for attacking Ukraine.
Putin is the aggressor. Putin chose this war.
The EU helped.
Now he and his country will bear the consequences.
The West preventing Russia from importing key technology, targeting members of Russia's elite, and what may be the most punishing, sanctioning 4 major Russian banks, freezing trillions of dollars of Russian assets. But as Russian forces move further into Ukraine, Biden cautioning it will take time for these sanctions to be felt.
This is going to take time. He's going to test the resolve of the West to see if we stay together, and we will. We will, and it will impose significant costs on him.
Biden, though, choosing not to sanction Putin directly, yet saying that option is still on the table. And as fears grow, Putin could push beyond Ukraine.
The
Biden
EU
also
has
ordering another
him.
7,000 U.S. troops to support NATO forces in Eastern Europe.
He has much larger ambitions in Ukraine. He wants to, in fact, reestablish the former Soviet Union. That's what this is about.
Now, here at the White House, the president this morning is taking part in a virtual meeting with NATO leaders as they continue to present this united front. This White House is adamant that these sanctions will be painful for Russia, but the president also warning that Americans here at home are going to feel the impact of this. He says this administration is taking steps to try and lessen that, but he's making the case to Americans saying, quote, America stands up to bullies. We stand up for freedom. Biden saying this is who we are. Diane.
All right, Mary Bruce, thank you. And the Kremlin is now claiming President Zelensky of Ukraine has said that he's ready to discuss neutral status for Ukraine and that Vladimir Putin is prepared to send a delegation to Belarus to hold talks there. So let's bring in White House correspondent Mary Alice Parks and security contributor Colonel Steve Ganyard for more on that. Mary Alice, I want to start with you. How credible do you think this news from Vladimir Putin is that President Zelensky is considering negotiations now?
Well, Diane, first, I think we need to be incredibly skeptical of any information coming out of the Kremlin. We've seen just an outpouring of disinformation from the Kremlin over the last several days, several weeks. And of course, Russia would want Ukraine to surrender. They're engaged in a full-on assault. Their end goal would be for Ukraine to surrender and come to the negotiating table. It was interesting that overnight, President Zelensky of Ukraine did say, let's sit at the table for negotiations to stop people dying. The fighting is ongoing all over Ukraine. Clearly, he is also pleading for some negotiations. He doesn't want a war to destroy his entire country either. But he did not call for his forces to lay down their arms or to surrender at this point. So I think we have to watch this hour by hour. And again, I think we have to be pretty skeptical right now about what exactly is coming out of the Kremlin.
And Vladimir Putin, on the other hand, has called over and over again for Ukraine troops to put down their weapons, saying, you know, that they mean no harm, they don't intend to attack, but also putting that message out as Russian troops were marching in. So what do you think this message, at least what Vladimir Putin is referring to as neutral status, what do you think he means by that?
Yeah, he wants guarantees that the Ukrainian government will not join NATO, probably guarantees that the Ukrainian government will step down. I mean, we've seen this effort to try to choke out the Ukrainian leadership and incredible frustration from Putin and from the Kremlin that President Zelensky has been so willing to align himself with the West, you know, has been moving towards a stronger democracy, has been having closer sort of ties and relationships with Western allies and Western countries, and has enjoyed military support, financial support from the United States over the last several years. All of that is what has frustrated Putin, which led to sort of this tipping point, this unbelievable invasion that we're seeing. I mean, President Putin thinking that if he couldn't get his way politically in Ukraine, he would try to take it by force. So I think that we have to be very careful looking into the idea of any possible negotiations between these two leaders when we are still seeing fighting and missiles flying in the streets.
And Steve, it seems the leading theory is that Russia wants to install their own government in Ukraine, or at least a Russia-friendly government there. How would that work exactly? And what do you make of this latest announcement from Putin?
Yeah, Diane, I think what they would really prefer to have is a puppet government that they could put into Kiev and to basically be at the beck and call of Moscow. We're watching their forces this morning continue to encircle Kiev with the intent of pressuring the government and bringing down the fall of the government. But these recent announcements this morning, where we're hearing both the Ukrainians and the Russians say, okay, let's talk. But the real key here is the term neutral status. It's important to look at geography to understand this idea of neutral status. After the fall of the Soviet Union, after Russia sort of was off on its own, and you had Ukraine as a now as an independent country, many of the former Russian parts of the Soviet Union joined NATO, and so all of this strategic buffer that Mr. Putin had went away. And so, especially since 2014, you've had Ukraine at least attempt to turn into a vibrant democracy. And they have been making comments about how they want to join NATO and how they want to join the European Union. And this makes Mr. Putin very nervous because he sees the U.S. as a tool of he sees NATO as a tool of the U.S., meaning that would put U.S. forces on the very edge of Russia. That makes Mr. Putin nervous, and it's one of the reasons that he has gone in and invaded Ukraine, is that he wants to put it, make Ukraine much more neutral at least, and at best he wants to make it a puppet vassal state of Moscow.
And Mary Alice, there's a NATO meeting being held today. What are we expecting from that?
Yeah, the NATO allies trying to decide what comes next, how in the world they might be able to respond to this if they're not going to, engage militarily inside Ukraine's borders. At what point do they draw up a NATO response force? We've seen the U.S. sending more U.S. troops to the eastern flank of NATO to try to reinforce and bolster NATO, the NATO allies there. But the question is, what comes next? Could there be spillover? We heard President Biden and Jen Psaki yesterday from the White House both say that they are concerned that President Putin could continue marching past Ukraine. Well, at what point then does he come face to face with NATO forces? What does that mean? What would that look like? I asked the White House yesterday, what about a cyber attack? What if a cyber attack lobbied by Russia was to impact a NATO country? Would that trigger a response from the entire NATO alliance? So far, we've seen NATO trying to respond collectively as a unified bloc. That is getting harder to do. They are really feeling the pressure right now to figure out any kind of response.
Сейчас наш разговор ни к чему не приведет. Давайте не будем усугублять эту ситуацию. Пожалуйста.
Put some sunflower seeds in your pockets. At least sunflowers grow real in the ground.
Ребята, положите в карманы семечки. Я поняла, положите семечки или семена цветов. Вы здесь семенами ляжете.
If you have combat experience in Europe and you don't want to look at the indecision and policy, all right, we covered that already. Europe has enough strength to stop the aggression, cancellation for visas in Russia's disconnect from SWIFT, complete isolation Russia, recall of ambassadors, oil embargo closing today. All this will be on the table. Wow. Okay, the market's going to open up in a little bit more than 5 minutes, so let's just take a quick look. Pre-market trading, things are still pretty green. The S&P 500 is up by 0.3%. The NASDAQ, the NASDAQ is up by 0.3 as well, and the Russell's up by 0.36. Oh, hang on, we have this. The NATO people are talking.
So, colleagues, I think we are ready to start. Good afternoon and good morning to all of you, and welcome to this meeting of NATO leaders with our close partners Finland, Sweden, and the European Union. Russia has shattered peace on the European continent. What we have warned against for months has come to pass, despite all our efforts to find a diplomatic solution. Moscow bears sole responsibility for the deliberate, cold-blooded, and long-planned invasion. We condemn Russia's aggressions in the strongest possible terms and call on Russia to immediately cease its military action. We stand with the brave people of Ukraine. We fully support Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, its right of self-defense, and its right to choose its own path. And this ends the public part of the meeting, so then I ask the media to leave the room, and we continue in just a second.
That's it? That's what they're giving us? Okay. I guess we're going to have to wait for some wrap-ups of that one. All right. Seeking Chinese influence on Russia. Okay, let's go back to the markets. Overall, pre-market, we're still seeing some green. If we take a look at it, yes, yesterday was wild. We gapped down below a key level, and then yesterday we pushed all day. It was from opening to, hang on, let me get this for you. From opening into close, we were up like 4.2%. What a crazy push. Right now, we actually have a little bit of a gap up now, which is crazy. So yes, that does mean that there's a chance of a gap down. You have to look at yesterday's high. So a potential target is 428.76. Actually, let me just map that out for us in terms of the overall market. 428.76. That was the gap up. We're currently at 429.54, and we're about 3.5 minutes from market open. So I'll be looking for that gap. And then from there on the upside, my first target, my short-term target would actually be around 435. So I'm watching basically 429 to 435. Those are my levels on the S&P 500. In terms of the Qs, another thing that's gapping up, so pay attention to the gap down fill or the trading downward to fill the gap because we are opening higher than yesterday's high. And then I'm looking for the breakout of basically 344. And in terms of the Russell, all three of these had a crazy comeback yesterday. Once again, gapping up. So look for the trade back down to fill the gap. And then to the upside, I'd be watching 199, 200, something like that, currently at 198.67. So I'm really actually watching that $200 key psychological level across the major markets. Just so you know, the S&P 500 has a short interest of 17.2%. The NASDAQ 100 has a short interest of 13.5%. And then the Russell has a short interest of 39.15%. Now, with all the craziness yesterday, yes, there were a lot of comebacks, but one of the craziest ones was actually AMC, which gained 12.4%, gapping up more today, up 0.8% right now, currently trading at 1782. My first level that I care about is around 1825-ish, plus or minus like 5 cents there, 10 cents there. If we can overcome that, and then I'm watching the low 20s. I do like the higher lows, so let's see if we can continue that momentum up to this next test of resistance in the low 20s. Just, you know, on AMC, short interest 21.13 and another day of utilization being 100%. In terms of GameStop, had a beautiful gain yesterday of 8.5%, up 0.43 in pre-market right now. It's at 125, which is a key level. After that, if GameStop can hold 125, I'll be watching 130. And just so you know, for GME, they had a short interest of 20.5, another day of utilization at 100%. Prague had a great day yesterday, up 10.5%. Would love for this to keep tracking higher. Same with Rivian, up 10.7%. Tesla up 4.8, almost broke down there, and actually right now up another 1.2% in pre-market. We have Lucid up 5.5 yesterday. Lots of gains yesterday. AMD up 6%, Nvidia up 6%, Roblox up 9.7%. You have Snowflake up 6.8, and then you have crypto, the whole crypto sector. What a crazy V-shaped bounce, like just a very dramatic bounce across the board. So that's kind of what's going on this morning. Let me drop to these 1 minute charts just so we can watch that bell go dingity ding ding ding. Let me get this 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute. And then this is the MOEX. That's equivalent in Russia to the US's S&P 500. But overall, that actually had a 6% gain after a pretty noteworthy like 30+% sell-off yesterday. So the things that gained yesterday, we'll throw up AMC, we'll throw up GME, and I guess we could throw up Rivian, Prague. I actually kind of want to watch some of these semiconductor plays just because of the implications of what's going on right now. So this is what we're going to watch for market open. That should be going off in about 10 seconds.
Dingity ding ding ding.
Dingity ding ding ding. The casino is open. Let's see what today brings us. And actually, let me take a quick sneak peek at some of my market internals right here. The internal indicators that I have, things are turning around. Yesterday's very, very strong performance. And actually, one of these robots, I didn't personally take the trade, but one of the robots at the end of the day did fire a buy signal. And this is more for the futures market, but it's futures on the S&P 500. We did see a buy signal get fired. Things are kind of flattening out in terms of like bearishness, which might lead to some bullishness, but obviously time will tell. Let's see how the open, what the open really does or doesn't bring. In terms of the S&P 500, the support I would be watching is going to be 427. We're at 429 right now. So I'm going to be watching 428, 427. Let's see how those do or don't respond. As this is going, we'll wait. We could watch market open, but I do want to see what's happening across the world right now. All right, what's ABC up to?
Saying that China has scheduled a call with Russia. And so that actually seemed to move the futures. And now, to your point with that opening bell, we do see markets moving higher. For Main Street, it's a lot more of a cautious outlook because Russia, as we know, is a large oil-producing nation. So any, let's say, taking out of supply, subtraction of supply is going to affect us all. So if you look at the national average price of gasoline, right now it's about $3.50 per gallon. It is likely we're going to hit that $4 per gallon mark pretty soon if oil prices stay as high as they are in the markets. And Diane, you know this affects everyday Americans almost more than anything else. And unfortunately, prices at the pump really affect the lowest earners in our country because they are the ones who are paying the highest percentage of what they have in their pocket to get where they need to go. And a lot of times that is work. Diane.
Now, we were already seeing historic inflation before this Russian invasion. So how do you think this attack could affect prices on things like groceries while people are already paying more for gas?
It's a great question. Unfortunately, I think the price of most things goes even higher. You said it, inflationary pressures. We are seeing inflation rise pre-Russian invasion to a 40-year high at the fastest pace in 40 years. Overall prices up 7.5%. But I go to the groceries, I see the prices that are there. Bacon is up 18%, peanut butter is up 15%. So there's a lot of items that a lot of Americans use or eat every day, or at least once a week, that are much more than 7.5% higher. But what happens with these higher fuel costs that we just talked about, whether it's gasoline in our cars or whether it's the diesel that food manufacturers use when they contract trucking companies to bring groceries to supermarkets, that's more expensive. We are the ones collectively who end up paying more for those higher energy prices. Also consider home heating bills, for example. Jet fuel prices, it is quite likely that airline travel gets more expensive if these airline companies pass along these higher costs of jet fuel, in the case of the airline companies, to us, again, the consumers who will be buying, in theory, airline tickets, Diane.
And Deirdre.
All right, things are more expensive.
Recently landed in Lithuania. Poland, meanwhile, has just over 6,000 troops at the moment, and the member states on the southeastern flank have smaller garrisons.
Russia, Ukraine, Romania is to the southwest, so is Bulgaria, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, all kind of bordering this.
I want to get right across to the NATO headquarters in Brussels, where DW correspondent and NATO expert Terry Schultz joins us live. Terry, what can we expect from the virtual NATO summit that is taking place today?
Hi. Well, I think everyone is trying to show a sign of unity against this invasion that happened despite the most powerful countries in the world warning that it should not. And so after the European Union leaders met last night, it was important to bring the United States into the equation, and that's done here at NATO. So you'll see the 30 leaders come out with a joint statement, of course, demanding that Russia stop its invasion of Ukraine, threatening to make it pay a high price. But at the moment, you know, they're going to be sending reinforcements to their own border. But the sad thing is they really can't do a lot at the moment to help Ukraine.
Now, Terry, NATO troops, they've been sent to support the security of NATO members in Eastern Europe.
Thus far.
But are these troops going to be staying there for longer?
Holds. Today is not the day to be the hero with
that's certainly unknown at this moment. What NATO likes to remind Moscow is that those troops weren't there at all before it invaded Ukraine the first time in 2014 and seized Crimea, because, of course, one of Moscow's demands is that NATO troops pull away from its nearest borders with these European countries. So I think that, you know, any expectations that these troops would be able to leave the Baltic states and Poland anytime soon has certainly been thrown out the window. And there's something else interesting that we talk about here at NATO headquarters, and that is that there is something called the NATO-Russia Founding Act, in which NATO promised not to leave permanent stationed troops on its borders with Russia. But there's a lot of talk now about whether that agreement even exists at all with what Russia has done lately. So
Tesla
those
did
troops
have a nice
could well
push,
be
but
stationed
kinda
there
giving that
much,
up
much
right
longer,
now.
if not permanently.
Now, another element to this conflict is the growing threat of cyber attacks from Russia, also targeted at NATO member states. Is NATO really prepared for such attacks?
That's true. And NATO has actually been helping Ukraine now for years to build up its own cyber resilience. But of course, the hackers and the cyber criminals are always one step ahead of the people who come along trying to fix things. So NATO governments have been warned to expect further attacks. And in fact, we have seen some of those attacks. Certainly, we saw elements of Ukraine's infrastructure absolutely paralyzed in the days leading up to the invasion. And they were told to expect that as well. I think that NATO countries do have put a lot into their cyber defense, into their collective cyber defense, and they know to be expecting this. But you never know if it's enough until it happens.
And Terry, just briefly, if you can you give us an idea of the timeline? What is coming next in this meeting, and when can we expect to hear some resolutions or decisions?
The 30 leaders are now in the meeting. Secretary General Stoltenberg
and this is all about the NATO meeting that started a little bit ago.
Brief remarks calling on Russia to stop its aggression against Ukraine, laying blame squarely on the Kremlin for what's happening there, and then moved into the closed session, which we expect to last a couple of hours. We will be hearing from the Secretary General when that wraps up around 5 p.m. Brussels time, Central European time.
Terry Schultz for us in Brussels. Thanks so much for your reporting.
5 p.m. Central.
And if you're just joining us, let's get a recap of the latest developments on the second day of Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Which would be 11 a.m. So it'll conclude in about 90 minutes.
To send a delegation to Belarus for talks with Ukraine. And that announcement was made as the EU revealed it will freeze personal assets linked to Mr. Putin. The news comes as Ukrainian forces continue to battle with Russian troops on the edge of Kiev. The streets of the capital remain largely deserted after another night of attacks.
Not too much. All right, let's take a look at the markets, the Qs. And the question is, are they going to hold on to 340? That is the golden question. The golden question, the golden question. All right, let's see. Man, oh man, what is our market gonna do today? The Qs made a new intraday low. They're actually performing the weakest out of the gate, and you're seeing Tesla battle it out right now at 800. Let's see if that can hold. For a bit there, GME was green, but now went red. DWAC is a green one that I have on my chart. How's DWAC looking? Trying to bounce off of 87.50. The Qs, the worst performing, the small cap sector, the best performing, and then the SPYs in the middle. But as you can see from the intraday setup, the tech sector getting hit the hardest, while the SPY and the Russell is actually holding pretty nicely. AMC currently trading at 1720, GME at 123. AMC, we're kind of in no man's land between 1670 and then 1825. We're just going to be in that region. GME, you're looking for the breakout of 125, which sets up a test of 130. All right, where are we going? The Qs, heavy. The Qs might be dragging things down today thus far out of the gate. Let's see what other kind of breaking news. If you are seeing breaking news, feel free to DM it to me on Twitter. Definitely feel free. Trying to refrain from condemning Russia despite intensifying Ukrainian attack. We kind of knew that. Man, this is behind. Lots of news. Eurogroup head, there will be economic costs for Europe. These costs will emerge over coming weeks and months. What else do we have? State Department. All right, what is the news? What is the ghost of Kiev? There's reportedly a Ukrainian fighter pilot who has taken out 6 Russian jets in air-to-air combat. He's being called the ghost of Kiev. Oh, wow. After Ukrainian pilot Ghost of Kiev shot down 6 Russian aircraft, he reportedly flew to Moscow. Oh, I can't read that. Who is, so there's, I guess, just some very skilled fighter pilot who's just like kicking ass right now. That's ridiculous. Ghost legend in the making. I guess it's just a very, very skilled fighter pilot that is messing things up for the Russians at the moment. A literal legend in the making. SPY trying to continue its push higher, but it just looks like the tech sector is dragging things right now. If I'm watching on the cues, let's just get to a little bit of a better time frame. Watch 334.35. It's at 340, so that would actually be quite a bit of a dip. I guess you could watch first 336. If it's not holding, it's just looking a bit heavy right now. But who knows? Maybe it's going to go the opposite way. It could just be this is heavy, but maybe the SPY is going to be so strong that it helps it upward. But seeing a little bit of the bouncing ball scenario in the tech sector. Not many green things. Crypto is green. Crypto looking green over here. All right. Do we have any other news now that the market's like kind of getting going on the day? DWAC looking a little bit. It's one of my only green things. I don't know what else to even have up. Everything else is kind of red. We have the other green things up. AMD was green for a quick second. The Q's breaking down. I'd be watching 336 at this point. The SPY intraday basis, well, that just broke. So now watch for an intraday low. Oops, I did not mean to put that line there. I'm talking about over here, the intraday low of 428.62, but I really care about 428 flat and 427 flat. All right. T-Money is calling out for a rug. Maybe. All right. Let's see what else is going on. The SPY coming back down to the intraday low, somewhere between 428, 429. Wants to examine if there's enough buyers there or not. All right. What is the news right now? This is from Euronews. Russian air regulators has forbidden British airlines from landing in Russia. All right, not much news coming from Euronews. What is this one? Holds conference on economy. How American miles are helping Ukrainians. What do we have here? Breaking. What is Al Jazeera
thinking? So could more have been done by the United States in terms of punishing Russia?
Probably.
Yeah, and to be fair,
right,
I mean, that is the point
sources.
that Vladimir Putin has been making repeatedly as well, is that the rhetoric is also coming from the West. And as you recall, in the lead up to this conflict, there had been what the Russian president alleged were reasonable security proposals that were presented to the United States and in conjunction with its partners and allies, and responses that were exchanged. And it really seemed to go nowhere. And that has led us to where we are right now. It's also interesting to note that as the Russian president was speaking there just now, simultaneously, what is also going on right now in the Situation Room of the White House virtually is that NATO Leaders Summit. So what you have is the West meeting as Vladimir Putin is very much isolated and conducting this operation. And to that end, the U.S. president has made good on his promise to levy very tough and financial punishing sanctions against Vladimir.
All right, we kind of know all that stuff. Gunfire heard in your... Is this breaking news?
And we think that the war will start. And it was a very, very hard conversation with the kids. And we received, of course, a lot of questions, many of them which was like, will daddy go to war? And
let me hang on. There's a question that I want to address. Hey, Matt, a little bit of a tinfoil hat here, but is there a world where a Russian cyber attack is used as an excuse to cover for AMC short squeeze? I mean, I guess anything's possible in this world, but I want to make something of my own opinion very, very clear. I think literally nothing about Russia, nothing about Ukraine, nothing about World War III has anything to do with AMC, with GME. I think, folks, people are losing their lives right now. It just, no. No aspect of me thinks there's a connection between the current chance of World War III, people losing their lives, and what's going on with AMC and GME. Not everything in this world is connected to AMC and GME, and people are trying to overstate that so much. I just don't see it. Folks, that your tinfoil hat is too tight. Over 137 people at minimum have been confirmed dead, civilians in Ukraine. Not everything in this world ties to AMC and GME. It's being so grossly overstated. You're talking about cybersecurity attacks, once again, in the realm of what? Cold War #2, World War III potential? And you're trying to connect it to AMC and GME? Man, oh man, this community, and Johnny, I'm not coming down on you because it's not just you. A lot of people, as I'm scrolling through Twitter last night, it's so wildly out of hand. There's people losing their lives. There's people being separated. There's people who are absurdly scared. And there's people trying to connect this to AMC and GME. Dude, holy shit. Folks, like, you gotta open your eyes a little bit more. Like, there's more going on in the world right now. All right, we're getting a little bit of bounce in the SPY and the Qs, but seeing some weakness out of the gate. Tesla not holding on to 800, Russell 198.50. Ghost of Kiev has an anime movie written all over it. I saw some people tagging it, and I didn't quite know what it was about. And then when I started reading more, the guy sounded like a complete badass.
Well, I just want my kids to know as less as possible about the war, and I just want them to be safe. And I hope that missiles never come to the city, and they will just keep and stay here until it's all over. And I will do everything possible, doing whatever, fighting if needed, to make it happen and to make this war end as fast as possible.
All right, Dima Kilshenko in Western Ukraine. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us during this difficult time. We really appreciate you coming onto the show.
Restricted finance.
Thank you. Thank you.
And European leaders have agreed to impose new sanctions on Russia over its war on Ukraine. But they held back from cutting Russia from the global SWIFT payment system after resistance from some countries, including Germany. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says the agreed measures would have a major impact on Russia's economy.
We will hold the Kremlin accountable. The package of massive and targeted sanctions European leaders approved tonight clearly demonstrates that. It will have maximum impact on the Russian economy and the political elite, and it is built of 5 pillars. The first is the financial sector. Second, the energy sector. The third is the transport sector. Fourth are export controls and the ban of export financing. And finally, visa policy.
So let's go to DW correspondent Marina Strauss in Brussels for the latest. Marina, Ursula von der Leyen there saying the EU will hold the Kremlin accountable. But does anyone in Brussels seriously think these sanctions will be enough to stop Vladimir Putin?
Many EU leaders clearly think so. And what we heard yesterday at the press conferences, and also when EU leaders expressed themselves in front of the press, they said these are the harshest sanctions we've ever taken when it comes to Russia. And they will clearly feel it. Russia will feel it. Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, will feel it. The aim is to quote, ruin the Russian economy and to isolate Russia economically and also politically. But the EU leaders have not got.
Check this out. The building of Security Service of Ukraine Chernobyl is on fire. This is all by Nexta. The International Olympic Committee urged that the sports federations not display the flags of Russia and Belarus as sport competitions. Updated data on the situation from Kiev from Gates. Cannot read that, unfortunately. A fire in whatever this district is 3 minutes ago. Obviously, prayers for Ukraine. Crazy updates. Crazy updates. Let's drop that. All right. Hang on. Let's see if there's any new updates from CNBC. Tobacco giant Philip Morris International suspends Ukrainian operations. Photos show the aftermath of Russian attacks on the Kiev region. Pope Francis visits Russian embassy in Rome to express concerns over war. Putin ready to negotiate with Kiev, Kremlin says. All right, that's an update there. Market popped, sold off, made a higher low, and now we're in the decision time. Are we going to make a higher high, or are we going to form a wedge? This potentially could be setting up the trend for the day. A little bit tough of a call because yesterday was an absurdly wild day. It opened at 9:30 and it was just nonstop. It just ripped and ripped and ripped. What do we have here? A Ukrainian pilot who is 6-0 shoots down a Russian Su-35 with his MiG-29. He's been nicknamed the Ghost of Kiev, and he's the first pilot since World War II to achieve ace status. Wow. Starting an account with 3K on 1-3. I'm up 17K. Was at 33K yesterday morning, but didn't have an exit strategy. I was in shock watching the market run on the verge of war and massive inflation. Jeffrey, on my own personal trades, particularly in the futures market, I'm right there with you. I was just dumbfounded by the amount of buying yesterday, and that shows that, like, and I get it. This is definitely a moment of heightened emotions, and it still shows that, like, it does bite you in the ass. But hey, don't be on yourself too hard. Like, this is a crazy situation. This is a very tough environment, and I would take solace in the fact that you're up, and also take solace in the fact that hopefully that's the biggest negative aspect in your life, that you just didn't capture as much profit as you possibly could have, because for many people in this world, they would love to be in that scenario. I might be able to get out for 12 to 13K. I knew better. I couldn't sell. I didn't believe it. Don't be me, people. I mean, it's tough. Like, this is a very tough environment from an emotional standpoint. This is a crazy, crazy scenario. Please, please don't be too hard on yourself. It seems like Putin surely knew a lot would happen in chess. You don't sacrifice a piece. He has next move. Doesn't make sense. I don't see him just stopping. I don't see him stopping until he basically has full control of Ukraine, or a puppet government set up in Ukraine. Like, the minimum. Matt, do you think Trudeau's Emergencies Act against protesters was to squeeze the hedgies that might have been hiding among them? I think I'm just being trolled on that. Justin Robertson. Am I being trolled here? All right, we're just building out a wedge in the market right now. As of now, the SPY and the Russell are green. I'm seeing red still. Tesla holding at 790 has been crazy, crazy volatile. Was at 820. I guess below this, you could watch 750, 740, but I don't think that'll happen unless you see the Qs breach below 338.50. If that happens, I'm then watching 336. All right, what other kind of news do we have? What's this guy saying?
De l'Ukraine et des alliés de l'Ukraine. Donc nous avons parfaitement conscience de où nous sommes, où nous en sommes du point de vue du conflit en Ukraine. Simplement, la France, je le...
Nope, I guess we're not translating that one.
If they are applying massive sanctions package against Russia, this is going to have also certain consequences on EU economy. Already we see some jitteries in the financial markets, but in this situation, as a European Union, as a Western democratic...
And in a news briefing this morning, the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson hit back, saying the country whose reputation will be stained is that which interfered in other nations' internal affairs in the name of human rights, and which went on to wage wars. So let's find out more about what that means from DW's Washington bureau chief, Inez Pohl. She joins me now from D.C. Inez, we've seen and heard this from the Chinese Foreign Ministry. Is there any question about what country it was referring to?
No, it was obviously referring to the United States, and Joe Biden's remarks you just quoted, he gave them yesterday in the White House. I was actually there when he gave this press conference, and he was really clear by saying Pardon me? Every
Sorry, I just said you're busy, Inez.
Oh, this is
Pardon
awkward.
me?
Sorry, carry on. I've just interrupted you.
Okay, so I'm talking about President Biden's press conference yesterday in the White House, and he made it pretty clear that any country who is willing to support the invasion from Russia into Ukraine would really feel like the backlash of that. So this is definitely kind of directed into, directed to the United States, these remarks from China.
So how are relations between China and the U.S. affected by this conflict?
Well, you know, China is in an interesting position here. On the one hand, they do support Russia. Maybe you remember the talks between Xi Jinping and President Vladimir Putin in Beijing just at the beginning of the Olympics. They said nothing can interfere our friendship. We're standing close side by side.
New intraday low.
That is what China really promised Russia.
AMD
On
is
the
green.
other hand, China really needs the European market. And doesn't really have an interest in any like harder or deeper economical interruption there. So they are playing kind of both cards. But on the other hand, they kind of have a common enemy with Russia, and this obviously is the USA, and the Chinese, would do everything to weaken the global role. And then maybe as a third point, by the end of the day, if China supports Russia now and Russia will get weaker over this conflict, then then Russia is also more dependent on China. So China has kind of a couple of cards here in the game.
Despite these international dimensions, how is the invasion of Ukraine being discussed in the U.S., among the U.S. American public and in the media? Surely there's a separate set of domestic concerns at play there.
Absolutely. You know, I mean, we always have to keep in mind that only very few Americans really know exactly where to find Ukraine on a map. They basically don't care so much about Europe anymore. The Cold War is over, and they're much more concerned about the influence and about the economical power of China. And that is, I think, very important to understand, especially for our European viewers. Many Americans never really experienced a war in their own country. When I, for example, talked with my father last night, who obviously really followed the news very closely, he told me how he felt when he heard the sirens in Kiev. That reminded him of his own childhood. I grew up kind of in the 80s, in the midst of the Cold War, so there was a constant fear of the breakout of another world war, and this is all kind of stirred up in Germany and in Europe, and therefore the public is much more interested in this conflict. That's very different here. People here are mainly concerned about their own interests, and this all comes in a situation when the United States is facing a fierce inflation. The gas prices are up, energy costs are up, and this is for many the biggest concern, that this whole crisis and all the sanctions are implemented kind of will backfire and make their lives even harder.
Our DW.
All right. We're seeing a little bit of a sell-off. Oops. Hang on. I want this. Hang on. It's still in my ear. All right, so we have some developments, and I honestly, it seems like we're in one of these weird things where yesterday everyone was calling for a crash, a crater, and then we ripped. And then today, as things are calming down a little bit, very big emphasis on a little bit, it just seems like the market continuously doing the opposite of expectations, continually doing the opposite of expectations. Definitely kind of, I guess, noteworthy, in my opinion, to kind of point out to everyone that we're just kind of whipsawing the opposite way. It's just people getting burned and burned and burned over again. And it's a very, very tough trading environment. This is not clearly we're seeing with the volatility and the whipsaw, especially when you're using in excess of leverage, it gets even more difficult, extremely more difficult. So just be careful. Don't try to make that like hero move where you go over leverage on a play, because right now we're just seeing extreme volatility in all directions. All directions. Man, oh man, what's happening here? SPY, I'm watching 428, 427. I guess we could watch 427 a little bit more specifically. The Q's going down on us. Tesla about to make a new intraday low. Kind of some interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. All right. 428. Let's see how this is going. Let's check in on some other updates for us, or hang on, let me get to some of your questions. To be honest, at the genesis of this bizarre online relationship, what began as explaining the difference between a regular pirate and a Greg pirate, I never had you pegged as a wartime correspondent. Well, I do appreciate all of your support. And I guess my commentary on that is I don't want to be a wartime correspondent. I want to be a market correspondent. And it's in the unfortunate situation where such a horrific, devastating global event, a wartime correspondent, has implications on the market. I'm exclusively covering it because it does have implications on the market. And also there's a lot of misinformation out there. I think there's a lot of people in their own echo chambers. So I guess I just, I feel, I guess, the desire to use the platform that I do have to do my best to efficiently spread, I guess, accurate information and updates to the best of my ability. And also, obviously, it's going to be more through the lens of the markets of what is or isn't happening. I enjoy the markets. I'm very passionate about the markets. And there are sometimes events and developments such as this, very, very negative ones, that clearly have implications. It would almost be kind of weird if I was covering the markets and then didn't even acknowledge what was happening between Russia and Ukraine right now. And on top of it, I guess I more have that personal drive that I just see so many echo chambers. I see quote unquote propaganda. I just see so much false information that, hey, if I can, to the couple thousand people in here, hopefully set people straight of what really is or isn't happening. Yeah, I'm definitely going to use my platform to do that. You won't spread information, but you get your sources from fake news. I don't get we're literally cycling through 5-10 different news sources. That's the best you can do. And unless you're on the ground there yourself, I think there's too many people who get it from a news source. We're getting it from 10 different Twitter accounts, 5 different mainstream media. And all of a sudden, if you start to see certain things being reiterated by all of them, you can probably say, okay, there's probably a little bit of legitimacy to it. Markets are far more reliable than news sources. You kind of do see things get priced in more rapidly in the market than news reports it. I agree there. Hey, Matt, stock question. Just curious, isn't today T+35 on FTDs, GME? Shouldn't they cover those? I thought the SEC passed a law to enforce. The T35 thing is it's been enforced. That's not a new rule, Nicholas. And also, T35, it's a rolling thing. It's every 35 days. So you'd be looking at whatever 35 trading days ago, that would be that group's FTDs. The 35 days is a rolling window. It's always, but also if you're talking about market makers, there's a way for them to bounce those back and forth where basically they have an infinite window. And that's another thing that's been built up way more than it should have, of this magical number of 35 days. It's another thing of people setting up expectations through Twitter and Reddit and YouTube of saying it has to happen, and then people get let down when it doesn't come to fruition. Next support on Tesla, somewhere between 740 and 760, but it could bounce right here if the Qs actually recapture. We sold off and this might be the low of the day. I'm like super hesitant to really call out a trend just because yesterday was so incredibly wild. DWAC fighting back green. It's one of the few. The SPY is still technically green on the day. For a second, it went red there, but now we're back to being green. It's attempting to fight back. It's popping right now. Yesterday was just so wild. So wild. Today is not a day to be using a crazy amount of leverage. It's going to be volatility. It's going to be whipsaw 100%. 100%. Let's check some of the breaking news. Hochstein tells there's an emergency governing board meeting at the IEA today to evaluate the action to increase global supply, as in reserve releases. That's going to be related to oil. Breaking State Department Energy Envoy Amos Hochstein tells that there's no disruption to the energy supply in Ukraine and Europe so far. He expects oil prices to continue receding to a level of a few weeks ago. All right, a little bit of positive development for the energy sector. What else do we have? Ukrainian Deputy Defense Minister, Russian forces have suffered losses of 2,800 personnel, 516 armored vehicles, 80 tanks, 10 aircrafts, and 7 helicopters. Putin tells Ukrainian soldiers, take power into your own hands. It seems like it will be easier to negotiate with you than the band of drug addicts and neo-Nazis that sit in Kiev and has taken the Ukrainian people hostage. That's crazy. The band of drug addicts and neo-Nazis that sit in Kiev and has taken the Ukrainian people hostage. So he's saying he'll negotiate with the Ukrainian soldiers. That was Putin to Ukrainian soldiers. Ukrainian's foreign minister says he's also discussed with Blinken further supply of defensive weapons to Ukraine. Man, oh man. It's the recent news from AFP. Russian president calls on Ukrainian army to overthrow leadership. All right, so tensions are apparently going the opposite way now. Like, it seems like things were getting better, and now with those types, he's calling them... But we're bouncing on that news? It seems like everything's just the opposite of what makes sense. So as tensions were seemingly getting better, we sold off, but now that tensions are seemingly getting worse, I guess the market pops on it. We're in upside down land. Nothing makes sense right now. You wanted to know why people are asking about AMC right now. The last correspondent said it perfectly. 80% of people can't even find Ukraine on the map. They care more about high gas because of sanctions. Kiev. I think that's how Russians pronounce it, and then Ukrainians pronouncing Kiev. Please someone correct me if I'm wrong, but Kiev is the Russian way to say it. I stand by the correlations between Russian meme cyber attacks and meme stock revolution to undo civil unrest, though. Don't think it's a conspiracy. I think it's just a failed algo that gamers picked up on and gathered as apes. Could be. How much is the AMC? AMC just below 19, currently at 16.90. We all knew about the Pfizer vaccine 3 months before it was reported. Yeah, the markets price that in. Markets do price things in more rapidly than like it really you could even read the news. Sometimes it's actually wild to see it play out. All right, we're seeing some lower highs in the market, but quite a push above 430, and it might not be done. So still overall, remember yesterday how we just saw the upward channel all day? It might set up for the downward channel if it were to kind of go down right now. But if it keeps pushing, we're not in a similar setup as we were yesterday. Not really a channel setup, just large swings. We made a new intraday low, and who knows, we might be swinging to a new intraday high. High volatility. And it's because of these swings. When you see large swings, that means you're going to want to use less leverage. Because if you're wrong, you could get whipped very, very rapidly. Even Tesla seems like it wants to come back up to 800. How's the Russell looking? The Russell bouncing on this as well. Thus far, the SPY is performing the best. The Qs are the worst, and the Russell is in the middle. What a bounce back. This is just nuts. What else do we have? All right, any news updates? Or we have about 50 minutes until we get an update about NATO. We'll be right back from Fox, ABC. They're on a commercial break. Day 2, Russian. All right, which Al Jazeera talking about?
Russians. I'm a little bit scared about my family and about my country. I don't want to go away from my land or my country. I will stay here. I will fight here for my freedom, for my independence, for my nation.
Devastation in the heart of the capital, Kiev. Ukrainian air defenses shot down a Russian jet overnight. Air raid sirens continue to pierce the sky. Russian tanks are reported to be on their way to the seat of power.
Even if our enemy will come here, I will stay.
The Kremlin has launched a multi-pronged attack by air, land, and sea. The military is hitting major cities across the country, including Kharkiv, Mariupol, and Dnipro.
If you look at the numbers, if you look at the equipment and the will, I think it's pretty obvious that the Russian forces will prevail at some point. What Putin wants to do is to impose the terms. He wants probably to have a regime that is seen as sympathetic to his twisted vision of this greater Russia.
Ukraine has banned all men between the ages of 18 and 60 from leaving the country. They're being told to stay and fight. Many are desperate to leave. After weeks of threats, people here simply didn't believe it could happen.
We are peaceful country, we have peaceful people, we have absolutely modern thinking society, and for us and for me especially, this is invasion absolutely unbelievable.
Now, on day 2 of the onslaught, there are fears that the arrival of Russian soldiers in the heart of the capital is imminent. Natasha Ganem, Al Jazeera.
Well, let's discuss all the latest developments with Anatol Levin, who's a senior research fellow with the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. That's a nonpartisan institute dedicated to promoting restraint in U.S. foreign and security policy. And he's also the author of the book, Ukraine and Russia, A Fraternal Rivalry. He's joining us from Wymontham, that's in the UK. Welcome to Al Jazeera. If we can first start off with the latest developments, and that is we heard from President Putin just a short while ago in a recorded message, and some of what he had to say is this. He was addressing Ukrainian servicemen, saying it will be easier for us to agree if you take power in your own hands. How do you read that statement?
Well, I think it's now pretty clear that Russia intends to replace the Ukrainian government. I suppose it's possible that if Zelensky made an offer of peace treaty and neutrality, Moscow might still accept it. But he'd have to do it very quickly, because otherwise Moscow will, it appears, take Kiev and put in a government of its own.
What are you basing all of this on?
Well, it's the fact that the Russian army has gone straight for Kiev, and the statements out of Moscow attacking Zelensky personally and denouncing the Ukrainian government.
It's being reported that they have broken through the corrosion defense. The Ukrainian Territorial Defense Forces killed men believed to be Russian saboteurs in Kiev who were traveling in a truck equipment was the ZU-23 autocannon. The men were wearing Ukrainian army uniforms. Italian Prime Minister has successfully secured a carve-out for Italian luxury goods. The EU's package of economic sanctions against Russia. Apparently selling Gucci loafers to oligarchs is more of a priority than hitting back at Putin, a source adds.
Russia's vital interest, it should not have come at a complete surprise. Why do you say that? And are you at least surprised by the speed at all of this?
Well, the reason I'm not that surprised is that ever since the 1990s, ever since NATO expansion began, Russian officials and commentators have been saying that for the West to try to turn Ukraine into an ally against Russia would lead to confrontation and very likely to war. This didn't begin with Putin. And by the way, it's an analysis which has been shared by many liberal Russians. So they did warn us again and again and again and again. It's just that, Western governments refused to listen. And of course, for a couple of months now, we've seen a concentration of Russian forces on Ukraine's borders. No, I mean, the invasion itself did not surprise me. As I say, what I did surprise me, and where I think Russia would be making a colossal gamble, is by trying to replace the government of the whole of Ukraine with a pro-Russian government, because it will be extremely difficult for Russia to sustain that in the long run. This government could not survive without Russian troops permanently stationed to protect it, and would have to rule, I think, through massive repression, because it would have no legitimacy among ordinary Ukrainians. Now, in the east of the country and in Crimea, possibly some other areas as well, as we heard from your correspondent.
Right, who's in eastern Ukraine, yes.
Exactly. Now, there, the Russians hope that they might get a measure of popular support from the local population. But unless they really have gone crazy, I don't see how they can possibly hope to gain that in Kiev and central Ukraine. So this is what has surprised me.
Okay, and just let's talk about the Western reaction for just a moment. I mean, there's a meeting going on right now of NATO Council members, as I'm sure you're aware. We'll keep an eye out and see what develops from there. But at this point, we've seen sanctions from some Western countries as well. I mean, do you think sanctions are going to make any difference to Russia in this situation?
Not in the short to medium term, no.
Shoulder, head,
the Russian establishment clearly, when it made the decision to invade Ukraine,
once again,
knew that it would suffer major sanctions and was prepared
for the breakout of 430.
In the longer term, of course,
that'd be pretty bullish, kind of like the inverse
permanent
neckline
economic
scenario.
Pressure on Russia might produce some results, but that would have to accompany, of course, a negotiating process with Russia. I really don't think now that Russia is going to simply withdraw unconditionally from Ukraine under any circumstances whatsoever. So we'll have to see, how this plays out, both in the short term militarily and in the longer term politically.
And as far as NATO is concerned, what do you think they're discussing right now, the countries? What's going on through their mind? I mean, are they looking at Kiev and wondering how long the government there can survive?
Well, I think first and foremost, of course, NATO governments are trying to avoid any possibility of a clash with Russia. They've withdrawn their diplomats, they've withdrawn their trainers and military observers. They've cancelled flights to Kiev. The point is, NATO will not fight Russia after. Which does, I have to say, make, the past offer of NATO membership to Ukraine look very strange and deeply irresponsible. But secondly, of course, they are asking themselves how they can bring economic pressure to on Russia. What they are not doing at the moment is, of course, talking to Russia. Previously, there were negotiations, though they didn't lead anywhere. Now, of course, talks have been broken off. One question is, at what stage will NATO, the US, Europeans resume talks with Russia? Because, of course, the point is that if NATO is not going to go to war with Russia, which it isn't, then at some point NATO is going to have to talk to Russia again. The question is on when and on what terms.
Okay, and thank you so much for...
It's being reported Ukraine has confirmed there was a shelling against a kindergarten in eastern Ukraine. This, by definition, is a war crime. Wow. A kindergarten. Shelling had hit it. That is crazy. China booze. That is just so disgusting. Let's see what Walter Bloomberg is talking about. We are assessing what happens if Russia cuts off gas supply as a retaliation. We would be able to manage, but not without problems. Critical infrastructure of Chernobyl nuclear power plant has not been damaged. Essential maintenance ongoing. Hungary's MOL asked for extra Russian oil supply via pipeline in Feb. And then Lviv has a new curfew. Ukraine's foreign minister says he also discussed with Blinken further supply of defensive weapons to Ukraine. All right, we knew about that. Hang on, let's go to this guy. 40 minutes ago, scorched earth in Starobilsk this morning following extensive Russian shelling on the Luhansk region. Putin said he'd start a war to save Donbass and then went in to burn it. Russian invasion forces gathering outside, possibly preparing for another attack on the city. That was an hour ago. That shit is so scary. Wildly scary. Prepping there. Damn. Let's see what the reporter, Kiev Independent, is talking about. That was 2 hours ago, 1 hour ago. Okay, 2 hours. All right, we have that. Any new updates? NATO will be ending in about the NATO meeting half hour. Kremlin says Ukraine proposed talks in Warsaw instead, then broke off contact. That's a minute ago. Kremlin says Ukrainian nationalists have deployed missile systems in residential areas in big cities. Kremlin says Ukrainian nationalists have deployed missile systems in residential areas. Kremlin says Putin has agreed to organize negotiations after Zelensky said he was ready to discuss Ukrainian neutrality. Kremlin says we have notified the Ukrainians of proposal to hold talks in Minsk. Kremlin says the Ukrainian proposed talks in Warsaw instead, then broke off contact. Something weird. Interesting. Kremlin says Putin has called Belarus's to organize Minsk meeting. So they agreed to it, and then I guess they try to move it over to Warsaw, and then all of a sudden they went dark. Just saw the photos of the aftermath of shelling kindergarten. This needs to stop. That's disgusting. A kindergarten. Jesus. And the market apparently going up on that. Up on that news. Crazy. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to me. And when things don't make sense, I find it better to just not trade. I'd rather sit on my hands because how is there not going to be very serious repercussions? I'm almost disgusted if there's not international repercussions for that. It just, none of it is adding up. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. War never makes sense, of course. But I don't know how those types of reports are coming out in the world, and then Wall Street's like, this is the time we buy. I just don't see how that ends well. What do we have here?
Move into the city in this invasion now amounts to the largest ground war in Europe since World War II. And now to a story that we first broke to you here on Live Now from Fox yesterday. Russian troops have also seized control of the former Chernobyl nuclear power plant. This was the site of the world's biggest nuclear disaster of all time. Now, a nuclear reactor at the plant, just for some background for some of you watching at home. Now, the nuclear reactor at the plant, which is located about 80 miles north of Kiev, it exploded in April of 1986, sending a radioactive cloud across Europe, which exposed millions to dangerous levels of radiation. Now, the exploded reactor was covered by a protective shield several years ago to prevent any sort of radiation leaks. The areas around the plant now remain completely uninhabitable. Staffers, though, at the decommissioned plant
The spy,
are
the
allegedly
Qs, and
being
the
held
Russell
hostage
all
by
went green.
invading Russian soldiers. Our Fox team is taking a look at this site and why Ukraine's president called the invasion and takeover of the former nuclear plant a, quote, declaration of war on all of Europe.
Russian forces and tanks surrounded one of the most radioactive places on Earth Thursday and took control. It was described as a fierce battle as Ukrainian National Guards attempted to protect the former nuclear plant where radioactivity is still leaking from an explosion 36 years ago.
It's obviously worrying.
The decommissioned Chernobyl nuclear power plant was the scene of a 1986 explosion after one of its reactors caught fire, shattering the building and spewing radioactive material into the night sky.
Q's popping, Russell popping. They went green.
Ukrainian
US still
forces
green.
set up the Chernobyl exclusion zone, a 1,000 square mile zone of forest surrounding the shuttered plant, which lies between the Belarus-Ukraine border and the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, in order to prevent a repeat of what happened in '86. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said officers did everything they could to defend it, but lost the battle.
So this might be a way for them to pull Ukrainian forces away from protecting those roads. And there are reports that there have been Ukrainians have destroyed Russian tanks up in that area.
The worry here is that any attack on the waste repository could send radioactive dust over not only Ukrainian territories, but Belarus, as well as other countries in Europe. But experts say the likelihood of something like that happening is slim.
So this is the world's largest metal structure that has actually that's clearly ever been built. And it's been said to be able to withstand a tornado.
All right, thank you for that report. And in the meantime, President Joe Biden is meeting with NATO leaders today to discuss their strategy.
That NATO
on
meeting is
Russia,
going
the
on
US
right
and
now.
Its allies are not going to punish Putin all of the way. Fox News correspondent Griff Jenkins explains why in this report from Washington.
Why are they not punishing him all the way?
No letting up on day 2 as Putin continues pounding Ukrainian targets and Russian forces begin to enter the capital city.
The weird emphasis on pounding Ukrainian targets.
The city of Kiev could fall in days or even hours as Ukrainian troops face an overwhelming force. The U.S. announcing a new round of sanctions. President Biden going after oligarchs and top Russian banks, plus export controls aimed at Russia's high-tech needs.
We have purposely designed these sanctions to maximize the long-term impact on Russia.
But the president stopped short of sanctioning Putin directly, and he did not kick Russia out of the major international banking system known as SWIFT.
I think you will see those kicking him out of SWIFT very much be in the game in the next few days, but it's a heck of a lot easier to do that if we bring the Europeans along.
Biden also says it could take time for these new sanctions to work.
Let's have a conversation in another month or so to see if they're working.
But Ukraine doesn't have time. Many residents seeking cover underground, in subway stations, uncertain about what comes next. Meanwhile, protesters are taken to the streets in Russia, speaking out against the Kremlin. While here at home, pro-Ukraine rallies are popping up coast to coast.
I'm a Ukrainian. I need to be with my people. I couldn't stay home alone and doing nothing.
As for how President Biden is handling the conflict, a majority of voters say he's not being tough enough on Putin. In Washington, Griff Jenkins, Fox News.
All All right, what else do we have? What's going on here?
Air attacks. New video posted to social media shows explosions over the city, and we're also seeing new images of the damage from those strikes. Some Ukrainians are taking shelter in an underground subway station. Others are trying desperately to get out of the country, arriving by the hundreds at a train station in Poland. The UN says more than 100,000 people have already had to flee their homes. And a senior U.S. official tells ABC News that he believes the Russian military is reinforcing troops and resupplying ammunition and food before moving in on the capital of Kiev. That official also believes Russia wants a stranglehold on the city over the next 24 to 48 hours.
Let's
bring in senior investigative correspondent Aaron Katursky in Ukraine, foreign correspondent James Longman in Moscow, and White House correspondent Mary Alice Parks in Washington for more. Aaron, I want to start with you. The Kremlin is now claiming that President Zelensky of Ukraine has said he's ready to discuss neutral status for Ukraine and that Vladimir Putin is prepared to send a delegation to Belarus to hold talks there. How credible do you think that claim is?
Well, we're not sure whether that's a stall tactic or whether there really are conditions that could be met to end the fighting through negotiation. It doesn't seem like it so far, given the aerial bombardment we saw of Kiev and its outskirts today and some of the heavy fighting within the city limits. Right now, it's believed that Russian forces are resupplying and reinforcing, getting ready to try and encircle the capital of Ukraine within the next 24 to 48 hours. But whatever pause there may be, we're not sure that's going to be enough for negotiations. Vladimir Putin was on Russian television talking about some of the conditions that the Ukrainian military could possibly, he almost urged them toward mutiny, it seemed. And we're not sure that that's going to be the kind of condition under which negotiations can take place. If as the Russian foreign minister said, the Ukrainian military would have to lay down arms before there could be any talk. The Ukrainian military is only spurring more people to take up arms, urging any able-bodied person to grab a gun and join the resistance. The Ukrainians have been fighting fierce battles in different parts of the country, but they're under no illusions about the power of the Russian military. President Zelensky, in a message directly to them, said, "You're all we've got." He's been appealing to the West for more, but no Western nation is going to commit boots on the ground here. And so Zelensky told his military, "You're all we have defending the country."
And James, as Aaron mentioned, Vladimir Putin is again speaking on Russian TV. What's his latest message today?
Well, it's more of the same, Diane. He's actually on television right now speaking to his National Security Council. It's televised again. That's only the second time that's ever happened. And, I mean, one of the quotes actually appeared, forgive me, rather deranged. He said, "Don't allow neo-Nazis to use your children, wives and elderly as human shields." He's talking to the Ukrainian military here. As Aaron was saying, this is an appeal to mutiny. To take power into your hands, it seems like it will be easier to negotiate with you than this gang of drug addicts and neo-Nazis who have say in Kiev and have taken hostage the whole Ukrainian people. So this is just more of the narrative from the Russian government that the whole of Ukraine is run apparently by Nazis, and that it's really important that they intervene to stop what they've repeated is a possible genocide. Now, it's worth saying that these sorts of messages have been not just repeated for the last few days and weeks, but this is the kind of message that Russians have been hearing for the last 8 years of the war that's been kind of bubbling on, I suppose is the word to use, down in the eastern part of Ukraine. And it's just, you know, it's a sentiment that Russians will have kind of just understood for so long because they have no other way of getting other information. I was on the streets last night with a lot of young people who have come out to protest. They're angry at these sorts of messages. They know where to get other information. They're on the internet. They are on social media. They have understood really what is going on, and they're angry that their country has been taken to war, and that this is the impression that the world has of them. And so, you know, I think we're just going to hear more and more of this until perhaps some kind of negotiated settlement, but it's, you know, I think it's too early to talk about that yet. So, yeah, we'll see what happens.
And Aaron, how close are Russian forces at this point to the capital, and what kind of resistance can Ukraine mount in Kiev?
Well, the Ukrainians believe that they can hold off the Russian forces in some spots, and they've been putting out messages claiming that they've inflicted a good deal of pain on the Russian military. But the Russians say they have now effectively cut off the Ukrainian capital of Kiev from the west and could start to soon begin to encircle the city. They're very close. They're within the city limits, and it's believed there may now be a pause in the bombardment and the fighting to allow for resupply and reinforcements to come in. We're told that of all of the troops that President Putin had massed along the border, only a fraction have actually crossed it so far, and they have very swiftly, within 36 hours, not even managed to get to the doorstep of the capital. The Ukrainians are taking up arms and these instructions to build Molotov cocktails to make bombs out of bottles, that could sow the seeds of an insurgency that lasts here for a very long time and make the conflict that much longer and that much bloodier.
And Mary Alice, several of President Biden's top national security team members were seen at the White House this morning. Any news on what's being discussed there?
Now, we know that the president was also going to meet today with NATO partners. You know, there's a big talk about whether more troops should be sent to reinforce the NATO eastern flank and whether NATO itself would sort of call for that, would put in place a rapid response force and specifically ask for NATO members to send additional troops. I asked the White House about that yesterday. Jen Psaki said that would still be a decision that NATO together as an alliance would make. So we're waiting to hear about what their next steps are. And they're obviously also working on this pending humanitarian crisis and refugee crisis. You know, I asked the White House yesterday whether the 17 members of an that were activated as sort of an emergency response force to head to Poland to help with the humanitarian response was remotely enough, if we could be looking at tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people trying to cross that border. They said no, it was just the first step.
All right, Aaron Katersky, James Longman, Mary Alice Parks, thank you. And do stay with us. ABC News Live will continue with more coverage of the Ukraine.
Mario Draghi repeated even today when he addressed Parliament. He said that Italy, quote, condemns Russia's invasion in Ukraine. And also he said that Italy will stand with its European partners when it comes to approving new sanctions against Russia. And clearly he also highlighted the fact that given how much Italy depends on gas supplies coming from Russia, well, the country will have to assess the economic impact that those sanctions will have on the country's economy. Giorgio Orlandi, Euronews, Rome.
The shock of the Russian invasion of Ukraine is certainly still sinking in here in Berlin and across Germany. But Chancellor Olaf Scholz seems to be trying to remain defiant, telling the nation on Thursday evening that Putin will not win. There were also words of solidarity again with Ukraine, not only from Scholz but also from former Chancellor Angela Merkel on Friday morning, who said that there was just no justification whatsoever for what she described as a blatant breach of international law. She called the Russian invasion of Ukraine a war of aggression. Now the question is how Germany and its European allies react in this extremely volatile situation. For now, Scholz is still hesitant to cut Russia off from the SWIFT international payment system. He says that option should be kept for later, but he hasn't yet expanded on what kind of situation he would deem it to be necessary to really take that further step. The German government did, however, push back against criticism of Scholz's stance earlier on Friday, saying that France and Italy had also raised concerns. The German government spokesman said that cutting Russia off from SWIFT would need longer preparation and that the effects would also be felt in Europe. Kate Brady, Euronews, Berlin.
Bulgarians form one of the biggest minorities in Ukraine, and the government today is scrambling to evacuate many of its citizens who are trapped in the country. Joining me now to tell us more about the government's plans and Bulgaria's relationship with Russia is Nadia Gancheva. She's editor-in-chief of Euronews Bulgaria, one of our affiliates. Well, Nadia, thanks for joining us here on site. Just how big is the Bulgarian community in Ukraine?
Well, actually, Bulgarian community is fifth
fifth biggest community in Ukraine. They form about 200,000 people there living, and a lot of Ukrainians are living also in Bulgaria, so we have deep connections many years ago with Ukraine and also with Russia, so that makes the situation a little difficult. But because of the number of Bulgarians there, the priority number one for our government and our country is to evacuate them and to make sure that they are safe. Tonight, maybe today, about an hour from now, there will be 150 people who are the first evacuated with buses, the buses that the government organized to go and take them. It's supposed to have 2 more today to get people out of Ukraine.
Bulgaria is also one of the importers of Russian oil and gas.
Yes.
Was there relief in Sofia that the sanctions weren't as perhaps tough as they could have been, or was the government sort of calling for stricter measures?
Well, the authorities in Bulgaria always say one thing, and they say we, NATO and the European Union, we just speak with one voice. So whatever our allies accept, we are with them, and we won't be different from them. But the gas supply is something really important for Bulgaria because we are in top 3 of the countries with high...
All right, hang on one second. I just want to point out that we do have this trend line and the market is just bouncing off of it and continuing to go higher and higher. For all I know, it could just be the exact same vibes as yesterday. Yesterday at 9:30, things were just ripping all day. Now, maybe it just started a half hour late, but this is just crazy. It makes the most minimal sense it could possibly to me. The one thing that makes sense about this scenario is in the market, you have to be prepared for the unexpected. But this is just wild. There's reports this morning of a kindergarten getting hit with shelling and Wall Street is going green. I don't know. It doesn't make sense. The only thing that makes sense is the fact that rarely war makes sense. Rarely the market makes sense. Just wanted to bring that up. But I had DWAC up because it was one of the few things that were green. Lucid turning green, AMD going green, Microsoft going green, NVIDIA going green. But we are seeing a market bounce. So let's see if this trend line does or doesn't hold, but it could just be another frustrating day. Speaking of frustrating days, there have been a handful of DMs being sent to me that in one way or another relate to Italy. So I want to cover a kind of an interesting piece of news that just a little bit of a warning will probably piss you off even more. So let's quickly hop into it. Apparently selling Gucci loafers to oligarchs is more of a priority than hitting back at Putin. Fury as Italian PM demands luxury goods are exempt from Russia sanctions as EU nations are accused of disgracing themselves over economic reprisals. Hang on, let me quickly zoom in on this just so you can see it a little bit better. Fury was mounting today over the EU's weak and divided attempts to sanction Russia over the invasion of Ukraine, as it was revealed that the Italian prime minister demanded and got an exemption for his country's luxury goods industry. Hey, I know the world is burning, but can we get an exemption on my stylish, expensive clothes? Mario Draghi was accused of prioritizing posh shoes over punishing Putin as EU nations disgraced themselves with a failure to take a hardline approach to sanctions against Russia. They are accused of frustrating British and American efforts to kick Russia out of the world's biggest financial payment system, i.e. SWIFT. Apparently, not everyone aligning, and once again, they would rather just their stylish shoes. Sources told Telegraph today that Draghi won the exemption for Italy luxury goods like shoes and designer clothes, saying apparently selling Gucci loafers to oligarchs is more of a priority than hitting back at Putin. This is wild. That, hey, as long as I have my Versace, who cares if we're facing World War III in the face? So that's obviously a horrible take on the situation, but it gets even worse. And this one's coming to you from the U.S.
Estimates are 50,000 Ukrainians will be dead or wounded, and that this is going to start a humanitarian crisis, a refugee crisis in Europe. We're talking about 5 million people that are going to be displaced. I mean, it's heartbreaking to hear.
Wait, pause. This lady, I don't know who she is, but this one, she's on. She's saying some stuff that really makes sense. We are potentially facing a massive, massive refugee crisis, whether it's good acting or not. I'd like to think that she's being honest. You can see there's the emotion in her voice. Like, her heart goes out to people who are currently being affected by this. And boy, oh boy, does it take a turn.
Here, what is going to happen?
Well, I'm scared of what's going to happen in Western Europe, too. You know, you plan a trip, you want to go there. I want to go to Italy for 4 years. I haven't been able to make it because of the pandemic. And now this, it's like, what's going to happen there?
Estimates are 50.
Yeah, you heard that right. What's going to happen in Western Europe? I have tickets to go on vacation in Italy. Are you kidding me? I have vacation. I bought these tickets. I haven't been able to go because of COVID, but now, because of this, does Putin even care? I want to go on vacation. I have a chateau. I have a villa. Where am I going to drink my wine? It's just, sometimes it's over the line, and it is not fair that Putin could possibly disrupt my vacation. You know, that was such a wild take. I think we have to listen to it one more time. What's Joy bringing us?
Well, I'm scared of what's going to happen in Western Europe, too. You know, you plan a trip, you want to go there. I want to go to Italy for 4 years. I haven't been able to make it because of the pandemic. And now this, it's like, what's going to happen there?
Estimates are 50.
I, too, am upset that I have not been able to go to Italy in 4 years. I'm right there with her. Oh, my God. I know it's only February. But potentially a strong, strong nomination for worst take of the entire year. Obviously going out to Joy there. So between her not getting her Italian vacation in 4 years, and then this guy who still apparently needs to make his money off of Gucci and his loafers and his Versace and all of that, talking about two wild, horrifically stupid takes on the current situation. I suppose the stupidity involved in both of these, a little bit, ideally, maybe, the silver lining, a little bit of comedic relief. But obviously, I'd love to get your thoughts on these two, because who knows? Maybe it's me. Maybe we are all looking for that vacation in Italy. Maybe we all are saying, no, like, who cares about it? I still need to buy my Versace. Maybe it's just me that thinks it's a little bit off base. So I'd love to get your particular thoughts on it. Just wild. Absolutely wild. You know what's wild is the fact that the market is still ripping, just not stopping. We're just apparently going higher and higher and higher today. Maybe it's going to be like yesterday. Dang. Look at this. The nonstop push just does not care. Does not care. It's as simple as that. I guess we're just going higher and higher. Is it really going to do this 2 days in a row? 2 days in a row? The market's like, we are fine with the situation going on. Was there positive developments? Am I like missing something? U.S. officials say Russian forces have not taken any population centers in Ukraine. They do not have the air superiority over Ukraine yet. Kremlin has said Ukraine proposed talks in Warsaw instead, but then broke off contact. Currently, Putin is offering them in Minsk with Belarusian president, who is involved in the invasion, by the way, presiding the talks. U.S. assesses Russia has committed 1/3 of forces around Ukraine to the offensive. 1/3 thus far. U.S. has indications that amphibious assault is underway west of Mariupol. U.S. defense official. Russia doesn't have air dominance over Ukraine yet, has observed more than 200 total missile launches thus far. Ukraine's infrastructure ministry says Russia fired on ships near Black Sea port. Man, well, not seeing what I would consider positive developments by any stretch of the imagination, but the market apparently liking it. It just doesn't make sense to me. And when things don't make sense to me, I just don't trade it then. This is just such a crazy situation. Let's see how this goes. I dropped the 3-minute chart just to have a little bit more of a consolidated view. Now we're seeing a couple other green things. Tesla going back green, getting above 800. GameStop only $2 off from going green. AMC 50 cents. Prog 5 cents. Who knows? Could be a wash, rinse, repeat scenario from yesterday. I don't know. Wild. All right. So in a couple minutes, we might be hearing from NATO. Is NATO going to have a live talk, if anyone knows? Hang on. What are they saying about Biden?
27 members of the European Union, including France, Germany, Italy, as well as the United Kingdom, Canada, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and many others, to amplify the joint impact of our response. I just spoke with the G7 leaders this morning, and we're in full and total agreement. We will limit Russia's ability to do business in dollars, euros, pounds, and yen to be part of the global economy. We'll limit their ability to do that. We're going to stunt the ability to finance and grow the Russian military. We're going to impose and we're going to impair their ability to compete in high-tech 21st century economy. We've already seen the impact of our actions on Russia's currency and the ruble, which early today hit its weakest level ever in history. The Russia stock market plunged today. The Russian government borrowing rate spiked by over 15%. In today's actions, we've now sanctioned Russian banks that together hold around $1 trillion in assets. We've cut off Russia's largest bank, a bank that holds more than 1/3 of Russia's banking assets by itself, cut it off from the U.S. financial system. And today, we're also blocking 4 more major banks. That means every asset they have in America will be frozen. This includes VTB, the second largest bank in Russia, which has $250 billion in assets. As promised, we're also adding the names to the list of Russian elites and their family members that were sanctioned as well. As I said on Tuesday, these are people who personally gained from the Kremlin's policies, and they should share in the pain. This is a speech from yesterday, by the way, if you missed it. We will keep up this drumbeat of those designations against corrupt billionaires in the days ahead. On Tuesday, we stopped the Russian government from raising money from U.S. or European investors. Now we're going to apply the same restrictions to Russia's largest state-owned enterprises, companies with assets that exceed $1.4 trillion. Some of the most powerful impacts of our actions will come over time as we squeeze Russia's access to finances and technology for strategic sectors of its economy and degrade its industrial capacity for years to come. Between our actions and those of our allies and partners, we estimate that we'll cut off more than half of Russia's high-tech imports. It will strike a blow to their ability to continue to modernize their military. It will degrade their aerospace industry, including their space program. It will hurt their ability to build ships, reducing their ability to compete economically. And it will be a major hit to Putin's long-term strategic ambitions. And we're preparing to do more. In addition to the economic penalties we're imposing, we're also taking steps to defend our NATO allies, particularly in the East. Tomorrow, NATO will convene a summit. We'll be there to bring together the leaders of 30 allied nations and close partners to affirm our solidarity and to map out the next steps we will take to further strengthen all aspects of our NATO alliance. Although we provided over $650 million in defensive assistance to Ukraine just this last year, let me say it again. Our forces are not and will not be engaged in the conflict with Russia in Ukraine. Our forces are not going to Europe to fight in Ukraine, but to defend our NATO allies and reassure those allies in the East. As I made crystal clear, the United States will defend every inch of NATO territory with the full force of American power. And the good news is, NATO is more united and more determined than ever. There is no doubt that the United States and every NATO ally will meet our Article 5 commitments, which says an attack on one is an attack on all. Over the past few weeks, I ordered thousands of additional forces to Germany and Poland as part of our commitment to NATO. On Tuesday, in response to Russia's aggressive action, including its troop presence in Belarus and the Black Sea, I've authorized the deployment of ground and air forces already stationed in Europe to NATO's eastern flank allies, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and Romania. Our allies have also been stepping up, adding the other allies, the rest of NATO, adding their own forces and capabilities to ensure collective defense. And today, within hours of Russia's unleashing its assault, NATO came together and authorized and activated an activation of response plans. This will enable NATO's high readiness forces to deploy and when and where they are needed to protect our NATO allies on the eastern boundaries of Europe. And now I'm authorizing additional U.S. force capabilities to deploy to Germany as part of NATO's response, including some of the U.S.-based forces that the Department of Defense placed on standby weeks ago. I've also spoken with Defense Secretary Austin and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Milley, about preparations for additional moves should they become necessary to protect our NATO allies and support the greatest military alliance in the history of the world, NATO. As we respond, my administration is using the tools, every tool at its disposal, to protect American families and businesses from rising prices at the gas pump. You know, we're taking active steps to bring down the cost, and American oil and gas companies should not exploit this moment to hike their prices to raise profits. You know, in our sanctions package, we specifically designed to allow energy payments to continue. We are closely monitoring energy supplies for any disruption. We've been coordinating with major oil producing and consuming countries toward our common interest to secure global energy supplies. We are actively working with countries around the world to elevate collective release from the strategic petroleum reserves of major energy consuming countries. And the United States will release additional barrels of oil as conditions warrant. I know this is hard and that Americans are already hurting. I will do everything in my power to limit the pain the American people are feeling at the gas pump. This is critical to me. But this aggression cannot go unanswered. If it did, the consequences for America would be much worse. America stands up to bullies. We stand up for freedom. This is who we are. Let me also repeat the warning I made last week. If Russia pursues cyber attacks against our companies, our critical infrastructure, we are prepared to respond. For months, we've been working closely with the private sector to harden our cyber defenses, sharpen our ability to respond to Russian cyber attacks as well. I spoke last night to President Zelensky of Ukraine, and I assured him that the United States, together with our allies and partners in Europe, will support the Ukrainian people as they defend their country. We'll provide humanitarian relief to ease their suffering. And in the early days of this conflict, Russia propaganda outlets will keep trying to hide the truth and claim success for its military operation against a made-up threat.
All right, everybody, you are watching live now from Fox. It is just before 11 o'clock in the morning here on the East Coast. You were just listening in to President Joe Biden's announcement from yesterday, announcing new sanctions on Russia over its multi-front war on Ukraine. Again, this is coming into our desk. President Biden, again, announcing several sanctions on Russia, but he did stop short of sanctioning Russian President Vladimir Putin himself and did not announce a ban on Russia from the SWIFT banking system, saying that Europe is not on board with such a move. Now, the sanctions that Biden issued to Russia would target more major Russian banks. He says that the sanctions will make it harder for Russia to do business in dollars, euros, pounds, and yen, and said that there will be new limitations on what can be exported to Russia. In addition to that, the sanctions will also be targeting Russia's elitists as well. So again, that is coming from President Joe Biden amid Russia invading and starting a war in Ukraine. You can see on the right-hand corner of your screen, that is a live shot of Kiev, Ukraine, the country's capital city. We do know that Russian troops are continuing to advance in the city. And on the bottom right hand of your screen, we do know that President Joe Biden is expected to officially announce his pick for the Supreme Court of the United States. We have learned who that pick is going to be. It is expected to be Federal Appeals Court Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. This will make her the first black woman selected to serve on the Supreme Court. She is going to be the current court's second black justice. Justice Clarence Thomas, who is currently on the court, a conservative, is the other, and just the third in history. Again, it is 11 o'clock here on the East Coast. Some of you are going to see a quick 2-minute commercial break. When you come back, our Live Now Fox team from in Phoenix, Arizona, Christy Larson, she is going to be taking over our coverage. Again, we'll be back in just 2 minutes.
All right, we don't need that. And actually, with this craziness, I'm trying to come up with a quick trade to express to all of you. And I'm actually kind of interested in this one right here because it actually expires today. So I'm trying to think of a way that we can quickly actually make some money here. And this is one that we could technically hold until expiration. And actually, did I just get my fill on it? So this is the one I'm looking at, this top one. Did I get a full fill? I don't know. I did. Okay, so I went in on the Qs. I sold the 346. I bought the 347. The difference was 20 cents. So I'm risking $80 per one, and the chance of being profitable is 73.1. 73.1, and here I'm about to post it. This will have the Qs are below. What did I say? 346. 346 below 346. All right, I am posting the trade on locals. Credit spread play the Q call credit spread. Sold the 346, bought the 347. Max return $20. Max loss, like what I'm risking, is 80. Percentage chance of making some money is 73%. And my goal is to ride it till expiration. And I'm publishing that right now. All right. If one of the mods could post this link, but basically here's what it is. Here's the rundown. Here's the play I just got in. A Q call credit spread. I sold the 346. I bought the 347. Like the spread involves two different calls. One you're selling, the other you're buying. it expires today. So if you agree with this, you might take this money-making opportunity today, or maybe you think I'm grossly wrong. But basically what I'm saying is when the market goes dingity ding 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 today at 4 p.m. in 5 hours, I think the Qs will be below 346. We're currently trading at 343. If I am right, I get $20 per spread. If it's above basically, what is it? If it's above, let's just call it 347. I could do the math later. It's gonna, at most, I'm risking $80. So you have to have at least $80 in your account per spread to play this. And the percentage chance of me making money is 73%. I will let this ride till expiration. It expires today. My goal is to let it expire as in hitting max profit. I took a handful of these spreads. I didn't just take one. This will hit max profit if the Qs are below 346, the one that I sold, when the market closes today. And this is the odds of the situation. This is all posted on mattkohrs.locals.com. There is a free version of this, and there's also a $10 a month version, as in if you play one of these spreads and it's right, that already pays for 2 months. And then if you do 5, like the yearly options, $100. But I just want to put that out there. I like spreads just because they're a little bit more conservative. So you get the money as long as we're at or below 346. That's how this credit spread play works. If you have any questions on credit spread plays, let me know. Let me know. Do a poll of how many vets are watching your stream and then ask their thoughts. Thoughts on what in particular? How many vets are watching this? How many of you are veterans or like current members of the military for whatever nation? I'm just curious. Could you show us on TD Paper Money buying an option and explain all the figures to us one day in detail? Yeah, for sure. It is kind of dependent on, like, I guess from a UI perspective of how it's laid out. I'm not sure that everyone is on TD, but if you're wondering what the Greek values are, I mean, I already have that video out there, so feel free to check that out. Shout out to all the vets. Appreciate your service, but a lot of vets in here. That's awesome. Very, very cool. I appreciate it. So, I mean, I guess to all those vets, do you think the situation is simmering down? I kind of hope your answer is yes. Or do you think this is one of those things that it's just the start? Not a veteran, just a veterinarian. All right, that's funny. German finance minister says we are open to cutting Russia off SWIFT. So the German finance minister is, we know Boris Johnson is, markets have bottomed as investors buy the invasion. Tom Lee says, German finance minister, we are open to taking Russia off SWIFT. Germany says they are now open to cutting. That's kind of a big deal. SEC proposes increased disclosure from short sellers, according to the Wall Street Journal. Germany, all right, we have that. SEC proposes rules to increase disclosure from short sellers. Man, oh man. What else do we have going on? Let's see what CNBC's up to. Ukraine. All right, let's listen to this guy.
Paul, do you think any European economic impact from this Ukraine invasion is priced into stocks at this point? I mean, we've got the higher energy costs, we've got commodities spiking, we've got whatever the emotional and sentiment impact of this across Europe is going to be. The comps going forward are going to be somewhat challenging for companies probably in how they're doing business in Europe. Is that priced in when you talk about the possibility that we'll get past this and look at the Fed as being a main driver?
Yes, John, I think, again, there's going to be an impact of this, but, we've been selling off in the market since, for a month now on these moves of Russia building up troops. And when you put over 100,000 troops on the border, Russia wasn't just doing that as a bluff, so I think markets were anticipating that there was going to be some sort of movement here, and hence the weakness that you saw. Back in Desert Storm, we put in, in 2003, we put, I think, 250,000 U.S. troops going into Iraq, and we eventually moved into Iraq. So I think the markets were anticipating this move. There's going to be some short-term impact, but oil, since actually the movement happened yesterday, oil's, I think it's, last I looked this morning, it was down since then. So again, the market tends to price these things in ahead of time.
Yeah, oil is down this morning, and we've been talking about the XLE being down for the month. Finally, Paul, you've done a good screen of names in tech that are low multiple and high yielding at the same time, and it's a lot of old school tech. I wonder how you balance those benefits with the view that a lot of these names may be vulnerable just competitively.
Yeah, so it's interesting. You look at the names that have the lowest multiples and the highest yields. You wouldn't even a lot of people wouldn't even know that they were tech stocks still. You have like Western Union is one of the names. Both HPs are part of the list. You have Seagate though. Seagate's an interesting name there. It pays almost a 3% yield. There's always concerns over that company's future. It's been like that for years. I mean, just that they're competitive threats, but they constantly have delivered over the years. So that's those names are boring. They're not going to be the most exciting names that we talk about on CNBC every day, but they held up very well this year. Some of them are actually up, but the few tech stocks that are up, whereas the high multiple, low or no yielding stocks are down an average of well over 20 percentage points so far this year. So I think, boring in these kind of
DWAC on
headline
the move.
Explosive moments is usually pretty good.
All right, this guy is kind of boring. All right, we listened to them enough. What do we have here? Kiev, just kind of doing its thing. Who is this one? Returns from Munich Security Conference.
And all the fires, because we are not seeing on the general media presentations and on TV the fact that Ukrainians are fighting. They are actually bringing down Russian planes. They are using anti-missile.
I don't know who this lady is. Did we ever get an update? Are they just about to go to commercial? Of course they are. Are we getting any updates on that NATO meeting? NATO. SEC just proposed a new rule requiring short position disclosure and a modification to CAT reporting of buy to close orders. We have a full breakdown of this proposal and information on how to write comment letters ready next week. Stay tuned. U.S. believes Russia is still in initial phases of Ukraine invasion, U.S. defense official. The SEC has proposed a new rule. All right, we already went over that. The Kremlin keeps being the best promoter of NATO membership. What is this?
Is the national OSCE's national members and providing security is the national sovereignty, and Finland and Sweden should not base their security based on damaging security of other countries, and their accession to NATO can have detrimental consequences.
All right, that's a little tough to follow. All right, what else do we have? Council of Europe suspends Russia from Parliamentary Assembly. Goldman probed over message using unapproved services. Formal Global Times EIC. It's Washington's dilemma. After Russia reacted strongly after being pushed to a wall, Washington abandoned Ukraine. As humiliating as its hasty retreat from Afghanistan, the U.S. is a gang leader who bluffs a lot but is timid at a critical moment. Its allies have seen through this. Jeez. The China state-affiliated media. Russia's invasion of Ukraine puts China in a difficult position. How to support an ally when relations with the U.S. and Europe are so much more important for its economy. Wow. Man, oh man. What? Hang on. What's this bot account? All right, cool. Thank you, Cosmic. This is, China is pissing people off. That is nuts. This is so ridiculous. China going hard in the paint. Hard in the paint, China. Man, oh man. Who is Donald Tusk, president of EPP? In this war, everything is real. Putin's madness and cruelty, Ukrainian victims, bombs falling on Kiev. Only your sanctions are pretended. Those EU governments which blocked tough decisions, Germany, Hungary, Italy, have disgraced themselves. Wild, 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 wild. Amidst the backdrop of extreme distress and global, there's a lot happening in the world of market structure. Next week will be a week unlike any other since January 2021. We've got some big initiatives coming together, an incredible confluence of events taking place. U.S. defense officials say the U.S. believes Russia is still in the initial phase of Ukraine invasion. The rule requires institutional asset managers to disclose gross short positions to the SEC and would result in public disclosure of aggregate short positions by the SEC on per security basis. It's a great step forward, but we'll have some thoughts on commenting for it. What is this? All right, people are, I guess, not happy about this video. Whoa, how did I miss this? This has 23 million views.
I'm so sorry. Dear President Vladimir Putin, I'm so sorry that I was not your mother. If I was your mother, you would have been so loved, held in the arms of joyous light. Never would the stories plight the world unfurled before our eyes, a pure demise of nations sitting peaceful under a night sky. If I was your mother, the world would have been warm. So much laughter and joy, and nothing would harm. I can't imagine the stain, the soul-stealing pain that the little boy you must have seen and believed, and the formulation of thought quickly taught that you lived in a cruel, unjust world.
What the fuck is this?
Is this why you now decide?
What is this?
Perhaps.
Is this a joke? Is this?
And only a mother can take away. When holds she doesn't the harm you could be if your mind was only.
What the hell is this? Who is this? Actress, human rights activist, founder, The Love Storm, anti-human trafficking ambassador. Wait, so it wasn't a joke? That was like just a pure performance. Oh, she got ratioed. Imagine how devoted everything. What is this? Am I missing something? Like, you're the first female comment that actually made me laugh. That's so hardcore. Kate from Barstool.
So sorry that I was not your. Dear President Vladimir Putin, I'm so sorry that I was not your mother. You would get so many raspberries after your bath, real funny ones on your little Putin belly. You'd laugh so much you'd shake like a bowl of Putin jelly. If I had been your mother, I'd let you stay up late to watch 90 Day Fiancé. You wouldn't understand it, but we'd have fun anyway. If I were your mother, I would rely upon you heavily for likes on Instagram before you were evil, which would build your self-esteem, and you'd say, I like myself the way I am. If I were your mother, you wouldn't have to invade Ukraine. Instead, we'd splash in puddles in the driveway in the rain. Perhaps it's not too late. We can spare the world such pain. Come over and bake cookies. We'll use up all the sugar cane.
Such a hardcore troll. Who is this person? I have a feeling that that wasn't meant comedically, but it's unfortunate that it wasn't. Well, that's another, we'll put that under another bad take of this whole scenario. Man. Tiger. Hey, cat. Big cat. What else do we have? That was, now I'm just distracted. We would watch 90 Day Fiancé. You wouldn't get it, but you shut Instagram for likes before you became evil. Oh, wild. Wild, wild, wild. Headline: How younger generation addresses war. All right, let's take a quick drink break, folks. This is insane. Seeing a nice pop. SPY cues. AMC currently $17.15. GME 120. Prague $1.30. Tesla 806. BBIG 270. DWAC pushing 92. DWAC waking up. CFVI. AMD up 3.7%. NVIDIA up 1.8%. Crypto ripping. Crypto is very much ripping. Okay. Nice. Nice city. Nice, nice, nice. We're seeing some there. Your little Putin belly. Oh, your little Putin belly. Pope is in Rome. Drone footage shows British troops Estonia transporting military equipment. Hang on, let me get this. British troops. Oh wait, this count posts quite a bit. China state banks restrict purchases of Russian commodities, pause buying Russian seaborne crude. Damn, there's some crazy videos. I'm sure if I show any of these ones, I'll be taken down, but how does this break? What do you think goes on if they end up killing Zelensky, the president of Ukraine? Oh, this is kind of nuts. Footage from video games has been misattributed as real footage of the war in Ukraine, with social networks beginning to ramp up attempts to stop spreading. So this is the exact kind of thing of like so much false information. People have been using video games and they're like, hey, this, like, that's nuts. Too much like just false stuff going on out there. Wow. Some of these videos and pictures are so absurdly devastating. Russian tanks moving in the district of Kiev. And as the market just rips higher and higher and higher, apparently, like in this, crypto actually holding on very strongly. I don't think we've gotten an update about NATO quite yet. Oh, wait, oh, wait, no, that's just a promo. What do we have here? What is this?
The moves are backed by top congressional Democrats like Senate leader Chuck Schumer, who condemned Russia's invasion and pledged support for Ukraine.
Ukrainians are tough and resilient. I know they will not give up their country. They will fight fiercely for it.
But Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell is blaming Biden for the crisis.
I think the precipitous withdrawal from Afghanistan in August was a signal to Putin and maybe to Chinese President Xi as well that America was in retreat.
He's not fun to listen to. What's going on with Sean Penn?
About the invasion. Photographed on Thursday attending a press briefing at the presidential office. Penn even meeting with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky in a separate room. The actor visited back in November and met with Ukrainian military. And this week, the Ukrainian president's office releasing a statement reading in part, Sean Penn demonstrates the courage that many others, especially Western politicians, lack. The more such people, true friends of Ukraine, support the fight for freedom, the sooner it will be possible to stop the massive attack from Russia. Also in Kiev this morning, Dancing with the Stars pro Max Shmerkovsky.
The reality is that it's exactly what it looks like on TV.
The Ukrainian-born dancer currently in his home country filming World of Dance.
Right there is a government building. I'm really blocks away from kind of where this is supposed to be ending.
Adding that he's still there because, like so many other Ukrainians hoped, he believed the invasion could and would be avoided. His wife and fellow Dancing with the Stars alum Peta Murgatroyd here in the United States with the couple's 5-year-old son making a plea on Instagram. Please pray that he comes home soon. Please pray that he has a swift, safe exit. I have faith, I have hope, and I have prayed so hard. Her husband commenting a crying emoji and a heart.
All right, well, Gans, thanks for that. And do stay with us.
Hearing now that NATO's Very High Readiness Joint Task Force, the VJTF, has been activated. Excellent news. This is being reported by Michael McFowle. I guess he's a professor. What the hell is the Very High Readiness Joint Task Force? Right. Let's look into what this is. The NATO Response Force is a highly ready and technologically advanced multinational force made up of land, air, and maritime and social operation forces. All right. What about the thing that I searched? Let's just go to Wikipedia. The NRF is the technical. All right, we already had that. It's comprised of 4 parts, so it's part of their response force. Very high readiness. They need to come up with better names. The purpose of the NRF is to provide quick reaction force of highly quality to the NATO missions as required. The concept of NRF, blah, blah, blah. The structure, so it's like one sub part of the NRF, the VJTF. During the 2014 Wales Summit, NATO leaders agreed to establish a very high readiness joint task force. The VJTF will be a high readiness spearhead force able to deploy at short notice to threats against NATO sovereignty. It will consist of land brigade numbering around 5,000 troops, supported by air, sea, and special forces. The VJTF would be supported by 2 more land brigades, rapid reinforcement capability in case of major crisis. Altogether, the enhanced NATO response force will amount to about 30,000 troops. The meeting followed the Crimean crisis and the Russian assertive policy of annexation of a sovereign state that didn't meet a substantial reaction. The need of a VJTF was reaffirmed within the Wales Summit Declaration of 2016. In February 2022, the head of Bundeswehr warned that German army had nothing to contribute to NATO readiness given Germany's current level of military spending. So the thing that apparently is now getting prepared literally came from Russia already. Like, this organization or this particular subunit was made because of what Russia did with Crimea. Well, hopefully that one bites Russia in the ass. What else do we have? A little bit of weakness that we're seeing. All right, here's the market. Once again, that is the Very High Readiness Joint Task Force, the VJTF. Russia has threatened military consequences against Finland and Sweden. I'm seeing a report of that. Let's see if we can find multiple. Wild. Wild, wild. Russia to partly limit access to Facebook. That came out 6 minutes ago. U.S. defense officials say Russian military has lost some momentum and is facing more resistance than it expected. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman says there will be detrimental consequences if Sweden and Finland try to join NATO. Oh, brother. Oh, brother. Oh, brother. Oh, brother. Russian to limit Facebook access starting today. Ukrainian border guards who died defending Snake Island when Russia attacked will be posthumously titled Hero of Ukraine. Limiting Facebook, team. Jeez Louise. Biden officials call Trump a nauseating, fearful pig. Oh, politics. EU prepares to freeze Putin and Lavrov's assets. Damn. Well, the Facebook thing's kind of interesting. Definitely interesting. Right. I guess taking a little breather after an absolutely ridiculous push, or is it just a fake out? And they're like, nah, we're just going to keep running it. We're just going to keep running it. We're just going to keep running it. Ghost of Kiev is still trending. This is pretty funny. Russians invade Ukraine, Ghost of Kiev. And I took that personally. The Ghost of Kiev. Man, a legend was born. Who is the Ghost of Kiev? Story of Ukrainian ace pilot goes viral. Unconfirmed reports of an ace Ukrainian fighter pilot have gone viral with with social media users dubbing the fighter Ghost of Kiev, supposedly downing as many as 6 Russian planes in the first day of combat. The Ghost of Kiev and their MiG-29 Fulcrum quickly became a folk hero in a war breathlessly watched online. According to one widely circulated post, the Ghost of Kiev is believed to have shot down 4 Russian fighter jets, 2 Su-35 flankers, and 1 Su-27 flanker and 1 MiG-29, as well as 2 ground attack aircraft, so-called Su-25 Frogfoots. The report remained unconfirmed by Ukrainian officials, and the war remains rife with misinformation and propaganda. As one Twitter pointer pointed out, such a kill could stretch the ammunition capacity. Well, whether it's true or not, it's still pretty cool. Damn. True or not, this is exactly the kind of inspiring story the resistance needs right now. I agree with that. Pretty important. So apparently just a baller of the sky. Throughout the conflict, the Ukrainian scene today, there is a Ukrainian that is soaring through the skies. A single fighter has already earned himself an alias. Wild. I guess it technically could still be erroneous information, but I don't know. Let's pretend that one's true. Still attacking hospitals and schools. That's crazy. Russian 5-year CDs dived to 489 basis points from 829 earlier, and record highs of over 900 on Thursday. Putin tells Xi Russia is willing to hold high-level talks with Ukraine, China says. Wow. America F1 team Haas has removed their primary sponsor, Uralkali, and the Russian colors from their race car. Damn. Russia's invasion of Ukraine sparks fierce, widespread outrage. Truly bonkers. Damn. All right. It seems like that's the most recent. We're back to the Facebook limiting, or Russia limiting Facebook thing. Definitely could be some serious propaganda. As SWIFT sanctions, etc., Russia continue to be discussed. Probably a good time to break this back out. Russia and China are using their indispensability in global energy markets and global supply chains combined with peak cheap energy to put the Fed into its Suez moment. The Fed may choose the U.S. economy or the USD. Interesting. I'm sure that takes a little bit more to dive into to fully understand it. Man, this guy's thumbnails are always spot on. Look at that thumbnail. Shout out to Dr. Disrespect. Like, what a freaking good thumbnail. What a good thumbnail. All right. Home. Anything. Russia's foreign ministry says threats from the UK will only lead to escalation. Okay, let's check in on the markets. So we shot up, and now things are cooling off. The RSI is probably blown out. The technicals are blown out. It just needs a breather as we head into the noon o'clock hour. All right, let's turn it over to some questions from all of you. You have a question? Lit it fire. Definitely lit it fire. Firefox, Clint Eastwood kicks Russia's ass. The Marxists are just robots, idiot. They're not real. They're real. Let's hope they are refueling them. Did the SEC and GG implement transparency rules earlier? I mean, it depends on what rule. Like there have been various rules over the past 12 months, 6 months, couple months. The new one is talking about transparency related to shorts. Because remember, on 13F filings, they report longs, calls, and puts, but not shorts. So it looks like they're taking a look into that. Have you ever gotten away with going into pattern day trading territory? I mean, I've been hit with it. I haven't gotten away with it. I mean, you'll just end up getting margin called. Are gapping on Monday? No one will know. I mean, it's going to be a long 48 hours. It's going to be a very long 48 hours. What else do we have? What else? Are you streaming all day? I don't know. At first I was planning, but now things are calming back. So maybe what we could do is like kind of an abridged thing. So maybe we'll just take a break for the crypto stream and then come back for like a full power hour or something like that. Because things are like clearly calmer today, but I feel like as soon as I say that, that's like when everything's going to break loose. Like all hell will break loose. Wait, what is this?
President Zelensky to see more support and call for more help as, again, they do have Russian troops continuing to push their way through. Now, he also made a statement saying that there were, obviously, Russia has painted him as enemy number one. He is a target, as well as his family as enemy number two that Russian troops would want to take down. So we're always following these latest developments. If we hear these sirens ringing out again from any of our live pictures we have coming from Kiev, of course, we'll be trying to monitor that, keep an eye on if anything follows those sirens as well. But one of the concerns that we have right here back at home is Russia has threatened cybersecurity attacks. We've seen it before, and could they possibly happen again with United States working as part of NATO with allies trying to stand behind Ukraine during this attack? Well, we do have live now from Fox's Daytona Everett, who speaks about that with a cybersecurity expert. Let's listen into that right here again on Live Now from Fox.
I want to bring in Kunal Anand, who is a CTO of Imperva and, quite frankly, an expert when it comes to cybersecurity. And Kunal, you are actually helping some of these banks in Ukraine right now amid the threats.
That's correct. We're actually helping many of these institutions, not just banks. It's really devastating what's going on, obviously physically, but also from a cyber perspective. We've seen some dramatic attacks over the last few weeks. And these attacks are designed to just go ahead and cripple core infrastructure, applications, services that people and Ukrainians really depend on. So it's been pretty crazy over the last couple of weeks.
So we were just listening in to President Biden, who has touted the fact that they have helped prepare Ukraine when it comes to these cyber attacks. Do you think that they were prepared for this?
Look, I'm spending time with a lot of our customers on the ground, and I think a lot of them need a lot of help right now. A lot of them need support. A lot of them need more guidance. A lot of them have never been through, obviously, anything like this before. So this is pretty unprecedented. A lot of them have never had to defend a network from a large attack. A lot of them have never had to worry about keeping an application or a really important backend for a mobile application up and running, and to withstand a large amount of traffic coming in. So, I mean, it's something that they're obviously not prepared for. We're seeing a lot of activity happening. We see a lot of critical applications and services going down right now. I think genuinely, Ukrainian organizations and enterprises of all sides need a lot of help right now. And I think organizations like Imperva and others can do a better job at sort of supplementing and giving them that aid.
From a cybersecurity point of view, I mean, how substantial are these attacks? How immense could the effects of this be for the Ukrainian government and economy?
Glad you asked that question. You know, I think a lot of people, when they think of a cybersecurity attack, they just think, oh, a server goes down somewhere, that's no big deal. But let's take into context everything that's going on right now, which is you've got a country that's currently being invaded by another, and you have people, citizens, human beings that are just understanding where their money is, if they have access to it. Maybe they want to get access to it, maybe they want to spend it, maybe they want to go somewhere, maybe they want to flee. How are they going to access their bank accounts? How are they going to go ahead and access that capital if the bank is down? How are they going to access it if those critical applications and services go down? And so how devastating could it be? You know, Russia's really smart. Russia has been very strong in offensive cybersecurity initiatives for years now. And they know that if they want to go and take a country, it's not just by taking it physically, but also from causing some harm and causing damage from a cyber perspective. I mean, look, if you can shut down banks, if you can shut down critical infrastructure on top of the invasion, the physical invasion that's going on, I mean, that's a pretty big combination and a lethal combination if you want to go and knock a country over.
Well, of course, these cyber attacks are not just hitting Ukraine, they're hitting other countries, including about to be the United States as well. Explain that to us, because there's other parts of Europe that are also getting hit hard, that you are addressing those situations as well.
Yeah, so for the last couple of weeks, we've seen some pretty big activity coming out of these nation states. So for example, Russia. So we've seen a lot of cyber attacks originating from Russia against various critical infrastructure companies and services organizations all throughout Central.
Hang on, let's pause this guy for a second. How Russians are reacting. I want to hear it.
Residents to flee to safety in
to join the North Atlantic military alliance, as NATO has so incensed Russia.
8 years ago, Vladimir Putin had a friend in Kiev, President Viktor Yanukovych.
Having pro-Russia president was very important for Russia. It meant that a lot of reforms would be stalled. It meant that any union with the West would not be possible.
And in 2013, when Yanukovych refused to sign an association agreement for closer ties to the EU, the people rebelled. Scores died, hundreds were injured in the Maidan Revolution. Yanukovych was ousted, and a new pro-EU government formed. The Kremlin answered back with tanks and annexed Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula. Moscow also threw its support behind separatists in the pro-Russia Donbass region. War broke out as the two eastern provinces, Donetsk and Luhansk, declared independence. European leaders brought the two sides together for the Minsk peace accords, but the war ground to a stalemate. A development far from the battlefield also spiked tensions. In June 2015, Russia announced the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. Its route under the Baltic Sea would bypass Ukraine, meaning Kiev would lose billions in transit fees. Another turning point in 2019, with Vladimir Zelensky as Ukraine's president. He vowed to restore the Donbass region and renewed calls for NATO membership.
Many leaders hint slightly that Ukraine shouldn't take the risk of talking constantly about membership of the alliance, because this risk is connected to Russia's reaction.
But that was a red line for Moscow.
And no one thought that if Ukraine creates such threats for Russia, it creates similar threats for herself.
It was one of Putin's justifications for the Russian troop buildup around Ukraine's borders. But unlike 8 years ago, Ukraine is a battle-hardened nation that's vowed to resist.
So let me recap the latest developments for you. Russian forces are closing in on Ukraine's capital, Kiev, on day 2 of a full-scale invasion. The mayor says the city's entered a defensive phase and Ukrainian military vehicles are entering the capital to protect it from approaching troops. Air raid sirens have been sounding in Kiev and other cities, prompting people to take shelter in metro stations. There have also been reports of clashes in and around the city after Russia bombarded it with missiles overnight. Ukraine's government says at least 137 of its soldiers and civilians have been killed across the country. Russian President Vladimir Putin claims he's willing to negotiate after Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky raised the possibility of neutral status for Ukraine, but the conditions for such talks are not immediately clear. Now, one of Vladimir Putin's stated reasons for invading Ukraine is the danger of the NATO military alliance coming too close to Russian territory. Now, with war on its doorstep, leaders from the alliance are holding a virtual summit to discuss increasing its presence on its eastern border. NATO comprises 30 countries, with the US the most powerful. If we take a closer look at its European borders, we see the Baltic states of Estonia and Latvia both border Russia, while Lithuania borders Russia's ally Belarus. Troop deployments in Estonia and Latvia are small, at just over 1,000 each, while reinforcements from Germany recently landed in Lithuania. Poland has just over 6,000 troops at the moment, and the member states on the southeastern flank have smaller garrisons. The US is sending reinforcements as the alliance moves to strengthen its eastern edges. Well, a short while ago, NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg gave his opening remarks ahead of the virtual summit.
Russia has shattered peace on the European continent. What we have warned against for months has come to pass, despite all our efforts to find a diplomatic solution. Moscow bears sole responsibility for the deliberate, cold-blooded and long-planned invasion. We condemn Russia's aggressions in the strongest possible terms and call on Russia to immediately cease its military action. We stand with the brave people of Ukraine. We fully support Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, its right of self-defense, and its right to choose its own path.
Well, as the Russian military besieged the Ukrainian capital, Moscow has said it will topple the Ukrainian government. The mayor of Kiev has announced that the defense of the city has begun. Thousands of civilians have fled. Those who remain are braced for a violent confrontation.
Another terrifying start to the day in Kiev. Overnight, there was more destruction. Bombs rained down, forcing residents to flee to safety in bunkers. Metro stations and cellars, packed with residents, grappling to come to terms with their new reality. It's hard, but I'm holding on. A nearby house caught fire, and there were many victims. And we were waiting until 7 o'clock in the morning in our apartment, in the corridor, in the bathroom, until the end of curfew, so that we could come here. I work here. I feel mostly tired and anxious. It's so strange. None of it feels real. I don't even know how to relate to it all. Above them, soldiers on the streets of central Kiev, and reports of gunfire near the government district. And on the edge of the capital, an enemy aircraft the Ukrainian army claims they shot down. Meanwhile, Ukraine's president sent a message to Russia. Russia will have to talk to us sooner or later. Talk about how to end the fighting and stop this invasion. The sooner the conversation begins, the fewer losses there will be for Russia itself. But in Moscow, repeated unfounded claims from the Kremlin suggest there's no end to Russia's invasion in sight. The aim of the operation was openly declared: demilitarization and denazification. We want the Ukrainian people, or as President Putin said, all the people living in modern Ukraine, to have the opportunity to freely determine their future destiny. But for most Ukrainians, the only future they're contemplating now is whether to remain in their homeland or to flee.
Well, European Union leaders have agreed new sanctions
NATO
on Russia over its
now?
invasion of Ukraine, but they held back.
Belarusian regime
Where
and
is
much
NATO
more
live?
can be done now to support Ukraine.
NATO,
And just on that, with so much of the world's attention now focused on Ukraine.
Where is NATO live? Reuters was following it. NATO. I don't think NATO's live. They were here before. Someone said NATO's live, but I don't think they are. Where are they live? Live. NATO. NATO live in 5 minutes, but where? NATO is Grado. Someone's saying in 5 minutes, but where is it being shown? On the NATO YouTube. NATO. Okay, got that. Is 1800 CET? Is that in 5 minutes? I hope it is. Man, market popping. Does NATO have an OnlyFans? Here, let me hang on, let me post something in chat. Oh, no, sorry, hang on, not that first one. Why? Sorry, I have the wrong thing. Ignore that first one. The first one's about stuff to watch, like TV to watch. This one, the thing I just put in for TTG, TTG is True Trading Group. They are just a trading and investing platform that I am partnered up with. This stream is brought to you by them. So if you want a little bit more of an official like market education, taking you from not knowing anything about it to that, make sure you're checking it out. It is in the description of the video. The first one is just a newsletter I found that like tells you like what TV to watch. Don't worry about that one. Like it was something else. Nothing to do with the markets. Hey, unless you are curious in a newsletter that tells you what TV you should or shouldn't be watching, then that one I guess is for you. I guess we're just waiting for that. Let's see how that goes. BBC News. Well, we also have this live from NATO. Like, I mean, I have this up. Hashtag apparently we are NATO. This market is just once again blowing my mind. Crazy stuff. Crazy. We're also getting real close to my level of 346, and there's still 4 hours of trading. Obviously, it would have been better to... Ooh, maybe I could just counter it. Then, not a bad idea. Hang on. Trade cues for the day. 342, 342, 343. 341, 342, 341, 342. I like that play. I'm going to post another trade. In locals here. I like it. Hang on. Posting. we're going to counteract the first one. What did I say? The spread was 340. Let's do 42 by 43. 43. 42. All right, posting right there on locals. Got that up. I just posted a put credit spread play on the Qs. 342 spread by 343 expiration today. And so if we go over 346, this will make it like break even. If we go below 343, it's break even. And if we end somewhere between 343 and 346, they are both winners. But the details of it are posted in locals. All right, this should be starting like now, shouldn't it? Am I wrong about this? Like, what is 1800 CET? That's now. It's 6 p.m. Central European Time, CET. Why is this not going? Let me reload. Is their website messed up? What else do we have here? I guess NATO's late. I guess we're just waiting. Waiting. CBS is doing their thing. Waiting. Whoa. All right. Happy we threw that other one in. So now the worst case scenario is a flat trade.
Would like to stress once again, but be very precise. He called the officials in charge of Ukraine a gang of drug addicts and neo-Nazis. And that is a very serious thing. Plus, like you've heard just before, he called on the Ukrainian servicemen to take power and become in charge of the country. And I would assume that this is something, this is pure speculation, but still, this is something that could lead to possibly a different group of people representing Ukraine to head to Minsk or Warsaw or somewhere else.
Russia says it captured U.S. Javelin systems.
Two sides could happen. So this could be what the Kremlin is expecting. Now, I do have to remind you that there are political forces in Ukraine, including the opposition in the parliament, that are pro-Russian, that have always been supported by the population in the country's east. Now, they have close ties with the Russian government. Indeed, previously, they have been called traitors by the Ukrainian government, but now
Council of Europe suspends Russia's right of representation and immediate effect as a result of Russia's armed European. All right, Russia remains a member of Council of Europe, but is no longer represented in the Committee of Ministries and in the Parliamentary Assembly.
That he made a couple of hours ago, he's in a situation where I believe he's desperate to start these direct talks with Vladimir Putin. Also, I'd like to point out that this was a complete change in tone compared to what Mr. Zelensky was saying about 2 days ago when the first stages of the Russian military operation were unraveling. Back then, he was saying that the Ukrainian army needs to stay put and victory for Ukraine is inevitable. Now he's desperate to have these talks. That was what he said
so in the coming weeks, you
ago
see what's going on here. I don't know what's going to happen, but you see the trend here. It looks like Russia's going to try to establish some kind of puppet government over there in the Ukraine. And the markets will now look past that and focus on what else they need to look at. And that's the Federal Reserve. So we're trying to figure out, are there going to be more sanctions here on Russian and Ukraine, particularly energy, commodity, restrictions on stocks, for example? Does the conflict spill past the Ukraine? Remember, before the Ukraine, though, the biggest worry was the Fed. The worry was the Fed was that they were going to hike rates so aggressively to combat inflation that they'd essentially kill the economic recovery. That was the biggest worry for the stock market out there. And the rally yesterday and today is partly on the hopes that geopolitical uncertainty will reduce the chances that the Fed is going to be really aggressive raising rates. Everyone agrees the Fed's going to raise rates. But there are a lot of people who think they'll try to raise rates 50 basis points in March, which is a lot. Normally they do a quarter point at a time. And there's now the majority who think they're not going to do that. They're only going to do 25, and then they'll do a series of 25, which the market probably can handle if the economy holds up. So, you know, there is bets being made about how much is this global turmoil affecting the Fed's thinking. In theory, in a perfect world, it would only affect them if it affected their dual mandates of employment and inflation. Well, you know, arguably higher oil prices and, you know, that's inflation. So that should be a factor in their thinking. This is what the market is hoping for right now. So this is all really complicated. Remember why stocks are having a problem. Number one, inflation. Normally, in moderate inflation, companies can raise prices, and so the stock market does very well. But when you have rapid inflation, you can't raise prices fast enough in a lot of situations, and it gets out of control. That's a worry for stocks, number one. Number two, you have the whole situation with the Fed raising rates. Again, in a good economy, the Fed can gradually raise rates and it won't hurt the stock market. But if the economy is weakening and the Fed is aggressively raising rates, those two combinations, that's bad for the stock market. Historically, that's always been bad. So there's a lot of like game theory going on here. What are we going into? Is how much is inflation, for example, high oil prices going to slow the economy? Well,
that guy's boring. Good points, though.
And you may find the following footage disturbing. We've received these images showing the aftermath. No children were in the building.
Gonna watch that. We're waiting. I get what's going on with NATO.
Unfortunately, not only is he probably Russia's #1 target, but his family.
Audio is weird there.
The advice of the authorities, and today I met them again. Well, some of them who were telling me that they were ready to go back and sleep in the subway, as they considered it the safest place, safer than their homes. Sometimes high up, you know, in apartment buildings and without shelters. So they are obviously bracing for what they expect to be an invasion very soon. Many people have been talking of a possible incursion even tonight. There have been no real signs of this yet inside in the city center, although here now we do hear the sound of sirens. There were quite a few impressing ones about half an hour ago, and that's, you know, that recurs every 2 hours or so. But they they do feel that this is happening soon. So there is fear, there is anxiety, but at the same time, what people have told me today is that they found a sort of a new modus vivendi in the underground. There's a whole different life under there. People are meeting new people, they're talking, they're supporting and comforting each other.
This is the downfall of the 24-hour news cycle. Sometimes people are just putting out stuff to put it out. UN says more than 50,000 refugees have fled Ukraine in the past 48 hours. Crazy, crazy, crazy. All right, where are we at with this NATO talk? Next by the NATO, like, I guess we're just waiting. What's with everyone being late lately? Late. SPY put spread 404 by 402. This is Tiblio, by the way. What else do we have? What else? Let's throw up the market. Let me see what I could find for us. The trend is my only friend. Oh, this is interesting. An example of here's a good example of war misinfo that's plaguing TikTok right now. This video is of a parachuting soldier with 20 million views on TikTok. The top comment, bro is recording an invasion, but he isn't. This is a video from 2016. Lots of misinformation going on. I guess we're still waiting on this thing. I should probably turn the volume up. Russia low-key getting their asses handed to them. Proud of the Ukrainian people. The bravery and fortitude they have shows an example we all must learn from.
A widespread, heavy-duty cyber attack on Russia from the U.S. is very unlikely, and vice versa, quite frankly. And the reason for that is that if Russia, for instance, attacked us and turned off our power grid, which they certainly have the capability to do, we would do the exact same to them. It's kind of a deterrent where it's the idea of obviously at not the same kind of scale, but a form of mutually assured destruction almost, where they would launch a cyber attack against us, we would launch a similar cyber attack. And while we've talked a lot about Russia's capabilities, it's not to discount the U.S.'s capabilities. We are more or less on par with each other as far as what we're able to do and what they're able to do to each other in cyberspace. And whether that's turning off the power grid, shutting off the internet, disrupting everyday life, we're more than capable of doing that just as they are to us. So I think that if we were to see some kind of cyber attack, it would be in addition to some other form of warfare where you wouldn't just go ahead and turn off the U.S.'s power systems. You would do that as a form of disruption in addition to something else, a kind of physical attack. Same deal with the U.S. to Russia. So it's not as though we can expect them likely to launch wide-scale cyber attacks, or for us to launch wide-scale cyber attacks that are very visible. Now, that doesn't mean that the U.S. isn't penetrating their systems just as they aren't penetrating ours. Everybody in the world is basically just breaking into each other's computer systems like bandits in the night. So we are in their...
That is Daniel Howley from Yahoo Finance, or on Yahoo Finance. All right, what else do we have going on? What else? Zelensky states in a video message, we are here, we are in Kiev, we are defending Ukraine. Did he tweet that out? Zelensky. Sweden provides military, technical, and humanitarian assistance to Ukraine. Grateful for Swedish PM for her effective support, building an anti-Putin coalition together. That's the latest tweet from Zelensky. All right, this NATO thing, is it just not happening anymore? I don't understand. Someone just said BTC no. I mean, still looking pretty good. It's not just going to exclusively go up. Russian dictator Vladimir Putin has made another televised address, this time calling out the Ukrainian military to take power in your own hands and overthrow the country's leadership, who he claimed were terrorists and a gang of drug addicts and neo-Nazis. That's pretty wild. Bullard repeats wants to see Fed rates 100 bips higher in July. Probably not going to happen at this point. Oh, by July. Never mind. That could happen. 1% by July. Apparently, Gary V will be on with Business Insider Monday, 9:30 Twitter Spaces. There's war in Europe and historical inflation in America. Dow plus 700 points.
Лідер фракції тут, голова Офісу президента тут, прем'єр-міністр Шмигаль тут, Подоляк тут, президент тут.
This is Zelensky,
Всі ми
obviously
тут,
speaking
наші
Ukrainian.
військові тут, захисникам.
It's going to be a big week next week for the visibility into market structure issues. New trailers out for HBO Max documentary on GameStop, payment for order flow, internalization, and issues around shorting. Looking forward to watching this.
GameStop.
Hang on, let me open this
GameStop.
up.
GameStop. Remember when you couldn't stop hearing about GameStop? Well, thanks to a bunch of nerds on Reddit, its stock price raised to heights no one could have ever imagined.
Because of all these hedge funds shorting the stock, GameStop started off as an undervalued play. So a lot of people are buying into it, not even worried if they lose all their money. It's more about a middle finger to the hedge funds.
There's this opportunity here to bet against what all the hedge funds did.
Finally, the underdogs had the upper hand.
This really is taking the world by storm.
Oh my God, it's making money.
Let's get these hedge fund monsters before they get us.
And that scared the shit out of some really rich people.
And then the Robin Hood thing happened.
They cut us off from trading because they wanted us to sell what we had.
What Robin Hood did, that took the wind out of the sails.
I've never seen a group of stocks that you can no longer add to.
There is a lot of emotion here. All of this rage.
Definitely the worst point in my life.
What can we do to give a voice to it?
The GameStop frenzy ripped the curtain of how rigged our markets really are.
They forced the broader public
to start asking questions that they've never really asked before.
And it's not just one firm, two firms, three firms. It's all the firms that commit capital.
And that cracked open a whole investigation.
Wall Street has been making money out of thin air.
So that's basically stealing, right?
The level of illegal activity is just astonishing.
The market does get manipulated in a lot of ways that we don't see.
But how do you play a game when someone else makes the rules?
Someone can cheat, and you'll never know.
It's intentionally hidden from you that you can't see where the problems really lie.
This is our one chance to blow up the Death Star.
I don't even care who the whistleblower is.
That's why it's important that people come forward.
This is just the beginning.
Streaming March 3rd. This is not one that I'm personally associated with, but I am very, very excited to watch it, and I will definitely be watching that on the 3rd, which is also in alignment with when Apple's coming out with interesting one of their own. So very, very excited. March 3rd. There's some cool things coming on. Exciting, exciting, exciting. I don't know what's happening with NATO here. I guess just not happening is the update, I suppose. What do we have here?
Grandparents feel one way and they feel another, and that's purely because of the media that they watch and consume. Russian state media, Russian language media, has a very clear message. It is controlled by the government. There is a watchdog here, censorship is what I think we would call it, which tells them basically what to think. And younger people who are kind of perhaps more clued in with the rest of the world, very definitely have access to the internet and social media, they are understanding something slightly different. And I've got to say, it was kind of heartbreaking speaking to these young people out on the street yesterday, because they're just young and modern and cool and just kind of kids who really, really want a future like everyone else and absolutely deserve one. And they're watching what's happening now and realizing that their future is really uncertain. The sanctions that are coming in now are going to bite. They might not bite Putin that hard. They've affected some of the oligarchs, but when you're making billions and billions of dollars a year, it might not be that much of a problem for you. But regular people will feel this, and it's young people who will feel it a lot, because, you know, I had one kid yesterday talking to me saying, what am I going to do? I was going to study abroad, that my visas are going to be cancelled now. Electronics, the price of electronics has gone up by something like 30% overnight. Can't use an iPhone, for instance. iPhones probably won't be sold here. Apple Pay is probably going to stop working. Things like this, you don't think about.
All right. Well, I don't know what's going on with this NATO thing. I'm kind of losing hope in it. Right now, the markets are a little bit calm. So here's the plan. I need to finally go and get some food and lunch and all that stuff. So I'm going to take a little bit of a break, and then we're going to be back. So I am actually going to stop this stream. We're going to do the crypto stream at 2. The crypto stream at 2 p.m. So in just over 90 minutes. And then right after that, we will be streaming the market into close, covering up, like kind of getting all the information ready, just so everyone knows what's going on in the afternoon session. So once again, I'm going to take a quick breather. I will be streaming once again in 90 minutes, 2 p.m. ET. That'll be on the crypto stuff, more crypto centric. That'll be a quick little just segment of everything going on in the world of crypto and how all this insanity is impacting crypto. And then from there, we're going to switch it back over to the quote unquote mainstream and cover once again everything happening related to the equities market. So I'm going to take a very, very quick break. I do appreciate all your good vibes. Shout out to everyone who dropped the like button. Shout out to everyone who joined up today. Seriously, it means a lot to me. If you want to check out TTG, it is pinned to the top of chat, and shout out to them for sponsoring today's stream. I do appreciate all of you. This is expect volatility. Things are calming down right now, but as you can see, it's been an absolutely wild, wild day. So whatever you're doing, be safe. Stick to your trading plan. That is of the utmost importance. But overall, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'll catch you in a little bit. And hey, from me and Cher, best of luck in the markets.